So, there was some issues with the,
Oh, good.
yeah, thank you for asking. Okay, good morning. I'm going to call a special meeting of July 20th, 2021 of the Hancock County Commissioners to order. Gentlemen, I would direct your attention to the agenda. This morning, we have set aside 10 o'clock for a workshop on the ARP funding. If by chance we get done sooner, I think Kitty may be here sooner, but if not, we'll take a break till she arrives and whatnot. I'd ask you to look at the agenda and ask if there's any adjustments to the agenda. Anybody have any adjustments they'd like to make to the agenda?
I'm going to move to approve the amended agenda presented.
Motion made and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries 3-0. I direct your attention now to public comment. Is there anybody out there this morning who would like to make a public comment? I'll give you up to 3 minutes.
Yes, I would like to make a comment in that I'm glad that you are continuing with the Zoom ability so that I can be part of the meetings and see what's going on. Otherwise, I'd have to come down there again the way I used to. And this is much more, much easier. So thank you. And allows a lot more transparency. And hoping other people will avail themselves of this way of doing things. Thank you. And thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that would like to make a public comment this morning? Hearing that, we'll move on. Agenda item 2, approval of the previous meetings minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of the July 6th Commissioners' regular meeting as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Our third agenda item this morning is District Attorney. Good morning, Matt.
We, do the commissioners have the recommendation letter that we sent for the hire? We're requesting to hire a lady that we interviewed named Colleen Rocker at grade 9 step B, based on information that was submitted previously. She was by far and away the best candidate that we had for the position. She had a wonderful interview and she has some really great experience that will be helpful for our office. I believe Commissioner Parity had a question about budget issues. My administrative assistant, Michelle, was here this morning, let me know this morning that because of the savings from Abby Dow resigning and from Amy Smith resigning, that's about a $5 an hour savings for the county. This position is only about $2 an hour more than Secretary 3, so I think there's still going to be a savings by hiring at this level.
And then, as I think was discussed last time, that's sort of your plan going forward before you cement it. So you don't see any long lasting. What you're talking about is the current budget.
Correct.
Moving forward, there shouldn't be any significant impact because of the restructuring. I hate to call it restructuring, but it's basically what you're doing.
Correct, yes.
Well, I'm not sure that I understand the question, but let's be clear about this. He has enough money for what he said in this year's budget to cover the additional expense from going to a legal secretary 3 to a 1. But next year, the 2022 budget, instead of having 2 legal secretary 3s and 2 legal secretary 1s, he's going to have 1 legal secretary 3 and 3 2s, which means even before we apply a COLA, there was going to be an increase to personal services for 2022. Because there's no way for him to be able to carry forth any savings this year to next year to cover the increased cost of that. So there, by virtue of this action we took last meeting, he will increase his 2022 budget by that, for that reason.
That's not what I just said.
Well, I'm not sure what he meant by what he said, but I think you understand that, right, man?
I understand that, and that is what Commissioner Clark is saying is technically true. The budget as a baseline will be higher. However, because of the employees we have at the grades that they're currently assigned to, I don't think it will be an actual increase. Theoretically, it's an increase because there are higher positions, there are higher pay grade positions, but I think because of Abby Dow's leaving and because of Amy Smith's leaving and because of Annalise Craig's reduction in pay, that overall, you're not going to see an increase based on just this position.
And you haven't done that analysis yet, right, Scott?
I have not completed it, but again, for the commissioner's information is that, the same dollars that we're talking about spending here were already spent when we took grade 1 to grade 9. Grade 9. So part of those funds came earlier this year.
Right.
So part of those funds have already been spent. So again, the exact analysis has not been done. I would agree. I looked this morning. There is money in his budget to stay within, at least overall. However, we also have to look at our transfer at the end of the year that, and Paul, Commissioner Parity may not be fully familiar with this, but generally there's a little bit of room to move within a department's budget. And again, this goes back to, I think, spending responsibly and doing the right thing. So that at the end of the year, that helps us not have to use that transfer. And it was much larger when we first took over the budget. And so we've been able to reduce that. So those are concerns for me. As far as an increase in next year's budget, I'm really kind of finding it hard not to see how it doesn't, considering we took the number 2s from grade 8 to grade 9. And now you're taking one from grade 6 to grade 9. The reason you're seeing it this year is because of your staying under budget, is because of the savings, situations that we've had. Yeah, and that going forward, you're only looking at a half a year versus, even less than a half a year at this point.
Yeah, I'm not trying to belay, I just want to make sure that we're not taking action that blows the budget or creates some hardship moving forward. That's the only reason for my question.
Well, this discussion, of course, should have been held before we took action last meeting. It would truly be unfair now to Matt to say, well, I'm going to reconsider that action.
I'm not
Especially,
interested.
yeah, okay, right, because today we're faced with Matt having 3 legal secretary 1s,
Right.
1-3. He wants to hire a 1.
Right,
And so I think we need to focus on that, having taken action last week
correct,
that gave him that 1, so that he could make the offer to his prospective employee. So
Yeah.
that's where we are today, gentlemen. He's requesting to hire Colleen Rocker as legal secretary 1. The issue here, of course, is step B, Matt, and if you could briefly make the case for that again.
Yes. Michelle, would you like to speak to that?
I feel if we hire at a lower grade, we really wouldn't get a qualified applicant like her. She has 20 years of experience working for the Department of Corrections in New York. She's done unbelievable levels of work with computer systems, legal work. She's worked as a legal secretary. She really has all the qualifications we're looking for. And in this position, it's so vital that we have somebody that's meticulous with discovery, because this is the basis of the worries for all the attorneys that work in our office. We need somebody that can do that discovery meticulously, not have errors that could impact their legal career. I mean, that's the basis for everything. We want somebody of her caliber. That's why we wanted to go with the B with all of her qualifications.
And I'm looking at Matt's submission to us on her qualifications, and you truly are getting a very, very well, appeal on paper, you're getting a very qualified applicant. I go back to some of my comments at the last meeting, though, and it almost seems to me that if you have this employee who is disqualified, not only deciding what the charges should be, what the language should be in the complaint and so on, and that's sophisticated information that this person could do for you. It seems like it's a waste of time for that person to be sitting there typing up their own complaint and typing up their own subpoenas and the work that your legal secretary 3 would have done for your 1s before. That's why you had 2 1s and 2 3s. 3s would do the input work, the manual support work to the 1s. Now you have somebody highly qualified doing remedial work. And it almost seems like, it's this adage where we hired the doctor to do it for the nurse's position, paying the doctor's wages, but he's doing nurse's work and it's combined with the doctor's work. And so there's nothing we're going to do about that. I understand, but it still is part of what led me to oppose this last meeting.
I think that goes to Commissioner Parity's request that we do redo the position descriptions. And Michelle has been working really hard on that, and she has 4 of them done. We have 1 more to do. And I think that will really clarify for the commissioners what is actually going on in those offices, because what you just described is not at all what the job descriptions will look like. So,
And that doesn't describe what she's going to be doing? So somebody is going to be doing her remedial support work?
well, part of the job description is answering phones and entering information, but that is only the bare minimum of what this position will be doing.
But there's a lot of that now. Who's going to do it?
Well, the Secretary 3 is the one who is primarily responsible for answering the phones and taking restitution payments from people who come in and doing the actual filing.
But over the years, that took 2 3s to take care of all that work. Now you've got 1 3.
Yeah,
So can 1 3 do all that work for the 3 1s?
so the 3 1s do a lot more of the physical transferring of files around the office. And so the way we've broken out the job duties, so for instance, Eleanor Truesdale, she's the Secretary 1 that takes in all of the police reports and prepares those documents for the rest of the staff to then process. So she takes everything in, she has to read every complaint or every police report and find all the names of the people involved in the reports and input those into our system. She has to be able to determine what the status of the cases at the time, whether there's a warrant out, whether there is somebody who's just been arrested, if somebody's been summoned. She's got to have a lot of technical knowledge. And then she has to communicate with the police. If we give that back to her after she's put it into our system, she's got to tell the police, hey, they need this, 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 and this. So that's basically her legal Secretary 1 position. And then Annalise, once the complaint has been generated, Annalise is the legal Secretary 1 person who does all the updating to the files, who makes sure that when the file comes back from the court and the attorney notes say, we need this, the defense requested this additional piece of discovery. She's the one that makes sure that the prosecutor knows that and that the police know that we need this additional information. And there's a multitude of other things that she also does. And then this Secretary 1 position in the front office is going to be in charge of putting all of the paperwork together, the discovery materials, and has to be able to know that this particular piece of discovery has to be redacted, or this particular piece of discovery, we can't just send this out. We need a copy of it that is identical to the one we're sending out. So there's 3 really distinct tracks that we're trying to identify people who need more than entry level work experience to be able to handle. The Secretary 3 is working in the front office to basically, at this point, will be assisting the Secretary 1 with all those tasks at their direction, not necessarily as a supervisor, but working together as a team to make sure that all those tasks happen. So everybody in the office, all of the Secretary 1, Secretary 3s, if there is a point in time where we're backed up on filing, they're all supposed to help with that. If there's a point in time when somebody's on vacation and there's nobody else in the front office, one of them is going to go to the front office and help answer phones, take restitution payments. So it's really hard. Michelle has done an incredible job putting together descriptions of what these people do, because they're all really complicated positions.
Are you opposed to renaming? For example, you don't have and haven't had a legal secretary 2 forever.
Right.
You have 3 who are truly legal secretaries. You have 1, the other way around. You have 1s who are truly legal secretaries. You have 3s who could be simply good filing clerks. I'm wondering if maybe as you're reviewing your job descriptions, you might change simply legal secretary and file clerk, or office clerk or something like that.
Mhm.
I think it's a misnomer to say the 3 is a legal secretary, in the sense that they really are more support to the legals. So anyways, I'm just throwing that out as perhaps a suggestion. Gentlemen, I'll tell you something though, and I'm not making any accusations, don't take any offense to this and whatnot, but many, many years ago, the county had a compensation committee and long before your time and whatnot. But what we did is we took all the job descriptions and then we tried to evaluate them together, come up with a numerical value that placed set you on a grade. Well, the district attorney realized that if he rewrote those, he could write those job descriptions to the grade rather than have the grade assigned to the job description. And so you're going to get, gentlemen, a job description that supports a one in the job description. Matt would be remiss to be sure that, he's got three of them. He needs that job description to support a one. And so, I mean, I would be very surprised if that came back something less than supported than the legal secretary one.
Oh, I don't want to get in the weeds because I don't know anything about running a district attorney's office. And, we have very different functions. The problem is they overlap a little bit. We got to work on the same team here. And I see the importance of a well-functioning district attorney's office. I think that's important. That's a vital role of county government. So I support this. It sounds like we're trying to make two different definitions meet in the middle, and that's why I made the comments that I did last time. So I understand. It's just, my only concern is because one of our responsibilities is the budget. Yours is, as a department head, is somewhat that also through the administrators, my guess. I'm still learning. But, I don't feel that I have the expertise to dictate how you should run your office and what the roles of your folks should be. Although legally, I guess we are somewhat responsible for that, if you read state law. But the problem is we do need to understand it. And that's why I made comments that I did last time for no other reason than that. And I just want to ensure that we're living within the budget. I think you've answered that question, and I think we need to be cognizant of that moving forward to make sure that we're not taking some action now that significantly affects the budget later, but it doesn't sound like we are, and I don't think you're professing anything that would disagree with that assumption.
If I could just add quickly, I completely agree with your statement at the last meeting that those job descriptions were not up to par. We've been somewhat remiss in redoing that. And like I said, Michelle has really worked hard to put some incredible, she works with these folks every day, hands-on. And so she's done a great job with that. And also, I just want to mention that over the past few years, I have been a little bit doom and gloom about changing software systems. I've asked for money to be set aside for that. It is, our expectation is that it's going to be exactly the opposite of what I was saying, meaning that there's going to be a significant savings in our software budget in thousands of dollars range. So we're moving from a software company that produces a software product called Justware, and we're moving to Tyler Technologies, which is the same system that the court system is going to be implementing within the next, being pushed back, but within the next 6 months to a year. The court system is going to be doing that, and we're going to be having a savings of it's something like 40% on that budget line for our technology line, which is a $30,000 budget line. So there's going to be a save. That's why I'm not as concerned about the additional impact here, because there's going to be a savings that I think will overshadow this $2 an hour.
And I'll stop after this, but this memo I really liked. It would have been so that if it could have, if this ever comes up, if it could address some of these things that we've been talking about, we would feel like we're sticking to
The only thing I wanted to say on it was obviously we're lucky that you found such a good hire. And everybody knows how difficult it is to hire good people. Yeah, right now you're gonna have 3 legal secretaries. It's no guarantee that when there's attrition, you're gonna get another legal secretary, one out of it. So just
That is true.
realize that this isn't like setting a precedent. It's gonna be 3. And as long as everybody understands that, then I think we'll be good.
And by way of reference, Paul, the department head has the ability to ask for up to a grade C starting pay based upon qualifications. That's easy when we're talking to the sheriff and he brings in an officer who's been through the academy with 5 years' experience. I mean, that goes right to the C. I mean, that's kind of the standard we use. So this isn't quite as objective on his reasoning as that is. But I can tell you from experience that this young lady has a tremendous amount of experience and certainly qualifies for step B, and I would support that.
And I'm still learning the scale, so.
Yeah, we understanding that we were talking about an increase in the position, we didn't feel that requesting a C at this time was appropriate, so we requested the B.
Okay, so I'm gonna move to hire Colleen Rocker of Surrey as legal secretary 1 at grade step 9B effective July 24, 21, as recommended by the district attorney's office.
Second.
24th is Sandy. Yeah. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Motion carries 3-0.
Commissioner, I just wanted to introduce Ms. Rocker. She's online here.
Good morning.
We recognize that name.
I'm sorry, I didn't see, it says Rebecca Wentworth below, and that's what was really confusing. I was trying to figure out who you were. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Stab me with her elbow.
Welcome, Ms. Rocca. Okay.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Good. Anything else, ma'am?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, just a second, please. When I don't use this, it times out and I have to log back in again. So a way to override that or increase that length of time.
There is, we could go into the
At
settings.
some point, I need to do that.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah.
what I do to solve that is open a document. Once a document's open, it won't do that to you.
I've got a document.
Yeah,
I
I
had
was gonna say, yeah, mine goes, but yeah,
I have my supporting,
We can fix that.
yeah, you can, yeah.
see, I had that open and, but I didn't move my mouse around. So after a while, I went to sleep on it and had to log in again.
I'll kick your mouse every once in a while.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to agenda item 4, emergency management. Morning, Andy.
Good morning.
Good to see you again.
Likewise, thank you. It's nice to be here in person for a change. Share one of these with each of you just for reference. I don't know, you had yours, Rebecca?
I do, thank you.
Once again, I'm going to take the opportunity to remind department heads that if you have supporting documents, please get those to Rebecca because she's doing a PDF now with all supporting documents so that we can put it on our laptop and have it in front of us and review it ahead of time. So feel free to, document like that, Andy, just to send to her in advance and she'll get it to us and so on.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep.
So very briefly, this is a topic I appreciate the forum and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about. This is a topic that I could much more effectively articulate conversationally today rather than in a written report or written form. So what I wanted to share with you is to use the June 9th storm that passed through Hancock County as a great example of the storm mitigation process and how that happens for us, if you're not familiar. And the reason I felt imperative to discuss this with you is because I know you're at the front lines of dealing with constituents, either as individuals, businesses, or municipalities that may be concerned or not quite understand the process themselves. And my obligation is to make sure that everyone is aware of the process. But what I really wanted to share with you, just again, very briefly, was when we have a storm event take place here in Hancock County or anywhere in the state of Maine, what we ask the towns to do is to complete this form. One side you'll see is listed as public assistance, public damage. And then on the reverse side is individual damage. Public damage is just that. It is if the roof blew off that courthouse, for instance, in a storm or some other event like that. If town infrastructure was destroyed, either a municipally maintained road, culverts, that type of thing, that would be considered public damage. It is those types of damages that then in the aggregate for Hancock County get passed on to the state. And then the state has an aggregate total that it needs to match before the governor can request a declaration of the president. So when you hear that emergency declaration has been presented by the president, declared by the president of the United States, that's the process. It goes from us locally to the governor, and then the governor makes a request to the federal government, the president, and the president decides to do that. If the president decides to do that, which is a political process, it then has to be funded by Congress. And there's no guarantee that Congress is going to fund a declared storm event or a declared emergency event. Great example of this, and most recent to us, is Hurricane Sandy. Everyone remembers the devastation that took place in those states down there in mid-Atlantic. It was 6 months before Congress authorized the first dime to go to any of those towns, any of those municipalities, or any of the states that incurred those damages. Millions and millions of dollars. So what's our number? Our number here in Hancock County is $208,965.
From that June storm?
No, that's what we need to have damages. Each storm event,
I see.
and this is much like a cost of living type of thing. This is adjusted periodically, lowered, increased some years. But our total damages in Hancock County have to aggregate to $208,000. Just under
Per event,
209.
Andy?
Per event.
Per event?
Right. The state, sir.
And that's how, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
No, please, go ahead.
And that's how the data is collected to arrive at that 208.
Correct.
Through this form.
It's through this form. That is correct.
Okay, so this form is triggered by the storm, not by that 208,000.
Right. And the way I approach this is ahead of a week. We're very fortunate. We know most of our issues are forecasted events. So before the first snowflake flies or, the day before the storm, I make sure all the towns have this document. And they know that we're looking for it. We make sure that they know that we want them to support it with photographic evidence, save the receipts, save the rosters for who worked overtime, all those things that would be reimbursable to them if we met that almost $209,000 cut. And then the state number is in the aggregate is $2,032,392. So the state has over $2 million number that it must meet over its 16 counties. So if the damage is through a storm or just to Hancock and Washington County, and the state falls below that $2 million threshold, the governor isn't going to request a declaration. It's never going to go to Washington.
Even if the damage is above the 208 for Hancock County?
That's correct.
I see.
That's correct. And and the public doesn't know that. Again, we work to make sure that people know that all the time. I never want to misrepresent it. Another challenging use of this form, which is why I wanted to share it with you, it's very simple, just a 2-page form. But, some towns don't have an accounting staff of 5 to put these numbers together for them. So, it's not forensic accounting. It's just, a quick thumbnail guesstimate. It's best that you can do. All right, what were your expenses from this storm event? And the town manager typically in many of our smaller towns just put together what they think may be their numbers. And then a number of months go by, and then if the state and the federal government agree that there should be funds coming from Washington to help recover costs expended, then they have to prove it all. So what we request initially is, just a best guesstimate turns into forensic accounting, where that town's eligibility may or may not be determined. That is an incredibly frustrating process. So it's almost a cry wolf scenario where I am loath to ask the towns to keep track of these expenses, knowing full right well it's never going to materialize into seeing a return. So I don't want to waste anyone's time, but at the same time, we're obligated to make sure that they're prepared and that they have this as a resource to them. So that is on the public assistance side. On the individual assistance side, on the reverse side of the form, this is almost moot, and this is really a disservice to everyone, because typically here in the state of Maine, we historically have almost extraordinarily never had an individual assistance declaration. The answer, if you get a call, if I get a call from a homeowner or from a town office says, I've got someone that lives at such and such road and their driveway culvert blew out and, is there money available to them? The answer is no. It's between them and their homeowner's insurance. or business owner and their commercial insurance, or whatever it may be. So why, government does a terrible job in advertising this and in promoting this because it's almost wholly unobtainable. But yet
Is
it's a
there
program that
is there a
exists.
criteria that you could meet for individual damage?
It is very arbitrary. So if there were a catastrophic event, if an entire town was wiped out by tornadoes, let's say, right, then individual assistance would come into play.
So a tree that came down and just completely destroyed one house would not qualify.
Is never going to qualify. Or even an entire town. You remember some years ago, the microburst in Cascade that came through and destroyed countless personal property and so on, and did not qualify because it was a solitary event. The damages on the municipal side didn't even qualify on the public assistance, and that's one of the criteria. The county has to meet the public assistance criteria before the individual assistance criteria would ever even be considered. So I wanted to share that with you because I know you get calls from time to time where people, ask, hey, how come I can't get money? Or I heard there was a declaration. What does that mean for us? It's been tightened up realistically and rightfully so over years. So, we jokingly refer to it as dough for snow. Maine doesn't get federal dollars because it snowed here anymore. That used to be the case, but no more. So it's got to be a significant storm event with real damage. It's not just that winter happened in Maine. And we're going to see damages come back to us.
I almost got no winter in Maine anymore anyway, so, geez.
One last thing to mention in this is that even if the declaration does occur and federal dollars do come to the county eventually, and it's many, many months process, sometimes years to make that happen, it is only at 75%. So it is not 100% reimbursed. The federal contribution is 75%. Typically, the state does a 15% from its return from the federal government, leaving the balance to the local municipality, which still, considering when the event, what transpired, the amount of damages, could be a significant burden financially. So in the June 9th storm, the town of Hancock, Sorrento, Woolsboro, Mount Desert, and Winter Harbor all submitted Form 7s that we sent to the state. Most of the damages, I think, from media reports occurred in Rock Bluffs, where, the town state road was obliterated. We're pretty sure that met the $2 million threshold at the state level, but we're just keeping our fingers crossed and seeing what relief may be able to come to those 5 towns here in
So this does not require any action. This is just.
Doesn't require any action. It's just simply informational. Again, it would be very difficult to put this in writing, to share it with you. It's just something conversational because it's timely, because we have these pending, I don't want to refer to them as claims, but that's essentially what they are. Claims from those 5 towns. I wanted to make you aware. So what the process is.
Keep us up to date on what happens with that claim, just so that we can kind of see the timeline and how it works out one way or the other.
It'd be my pleasure to do that.
Just out of curiosity, since you kind of showed us the basis of how it starts, but we kind of actually see a real world example of it happening, not happening, or happening. It would be interesting to kind of see how.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you. Any other questions?
Not on this, but while we have you here this morning, Andy, I want, on behalf of the commission and whatnot, I want to recognize the value that you have brought to the county in the last 15 months during this COVID epidemic. Andy has been our point man and whatnot, and we truly, truly appreciate the hard work that you put in and assisting us there. Also, many times and whatnot, you have talked about Al Mays and his help from Augusta
Yes.
and whatnot. And I would like somehow to draft something from the commission that says, Andy, thank you for your hard work, and Al, thank you for yours, and make sure Al understands that we certainly appreciate our EMA director and the work he's done. So between you and Rebecca and Scott, could you draft something for us?
It would be my pleasure to do so, and I thank you for your kind words. In all humility and sincerity, I have to step aside and say it's really this young man here who's been the point person and the brain trust in this and has done the heavy lift. Just based on his technical background, he's a paramedic and deals with paramedicine every day. and much more connected to the pandemic and its evolution over the last 15, 18 months than I. So I, acting on his good counsel, that's where the credit really goes. And certainly Al May is the other side of that equation. So I appreciate that opportunity and we'll do that. Thank you.
Great, and perhaps at some point in the future, you'll bring us something that we can sign and send along to somebody.
Absolutely. Maybe present to him. So
Agreement, thanks.
thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Moving on to the airport. Leroy is with us remotely this morning.
Good morning.
This is really the best of both worlds. You know, the fact that we're able to meet again here in person, but at the same time, we're still having the benefits of the remote attendance. And Leroy's a good example.
I thought you were gonna say it was nice not to have Leroy in the same room.
Well, maybe Leroy feels that way. He's the one that didn't come out. Anyways, let's look at the agenda, Leroy, and direct your attention to your first request.
Yes, these are actually A, B, and C are all going to be the approval for the grant applications. So the first one is the request for the airport improvement program, 3-23-006-052-2021 airfield pavement remarking grant offer, and for the chair to sign. I believe you've already signed them from what I've seen on.
I signed them remotely, electronically, whatnot.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to make sure that, this got in the record that, it was approved. That's
What
all.
we're doing, gentlemen, is simply following up what action has been previously taken and it needs to be
So
frequent.
we, just so I have this right, what we did is we had action to seek the grant. Now this is action to approve and sign the grant.
Right, to accept the grant, yes, to accept, yes. And these grants are, this year, again, 100% federal funded. So the upside is no local funds again this year for any of this, so.
Okay, so I'm gonna move to approve now that I know exactly, move to approve the Airport Improvement Program 3-23-006-052-2021 airfield pavement remarking grant offer and authorize the chair to sign the grant offer.
Second.
Rebecca, you're taking this from the not from his verbal, right? In other words, he left out a zero. That's what I'm saying. Yes, you're taking the motion from this.
Yeah, I submit all my motions in writing,
Yeah,
so.
good. Okay, all right, very good. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye, motion carries 3-0.
Okay, B is all the same at the beginning. This is just 053, which is moving forward. That's how they'll be as AIP 053. For the new rotating beacon replacement grant offer and the chair to sign.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 3-0.
C will be all the same, other than it's a 054, and that's going to be for a pavement management study grant offer and the chairman to sign.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. What did you? I'm just curious, what is a pavement management?
We're required to have a pavement management program
What's that mean? What's that, what do we? What,
on the air side.
yeah,
So
are
this-
we testing the pavement? Is that what we're doing?
They're going to be testing the pavement to verify how good it is, and it'll be in several locations, and they'll grid it. So they'll be able to go right back to a grid location and say, this piece meets X
Okay. I
number
understand.
and so on.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 3-0. Item D,
request for the approval of the contract for JJ Cunningham LLC, 200 Woodbine, Shepherdstown, Pennsylvania, in the amount of $150,517.50 for the airfield pavement remarking project. Jacobs recommends approval. And this is all reimbursable through the program. We just have to have we have to sign the contract with them, that's all. And for the chair to sign.
Okay, so this is, so moved first. How's that?
Second.
Okay, and then my question is, this is basically signing the contract for the grant that we just accepted to facilitate the project for the grant that we accepted.
That is correct. That is correct.
Larry, what's the bid process for this? How did Cunningham get the bid?
Let me find that. Cunningham, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bids submitted. They was the lowest bid. The highest bid was 300,000.
What was the process? In other words, where was the bid opening and who was?
Jacobs. All that went to Jacobs.
It's sort of outlined in the memo that was at the back of the contract. I don't know what it was. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's at the back of the contract. That's.
Yeah, Chair, if I could, you actually came in that day. We opened those bids
for this one?
in the office.
I do remember coming in, is that what?
Yeah, that's what these,
Is that what these are?
these were the bids that we opened up and we had
Okay.
a quick Zoom meeting and, yes, and then, sent all the information, and that's the general process.
Okay, so, yeah, that was my concern.
Remember, we want to try to get this now linked into a Tuesday meeting or a better schedule than what it was prior to that conversation.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, I understand now, right.
Yes.
So this was a public opening then? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons we have a consultant to do
Right,
this, so that we do it correctly, because this is federal money, as I understand.
correct.
I'm just concerned that the public might say, you're not doing this in a public setting and.
Nope, we did.
Yeah, good. I remember being, I didn't remember this being this
Yeah.
particular case. Very good. So we have a motion made and seconded on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Aye, motion carries 3-0.
Okay, the last one I got is a request for the approval of the contract for Mollison's Electric, 10 Iron Trail Road, Biddeford, in the amount of $172,700 for the new rotating beacon. Again, Jacobs recommends, and for the chair to sign. So there was 3 bidders for that one, ranging everywhere from 172,700 to 225,700.
And Scott reminds me that on the same day, we opened 2 bids, and this is.
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't involved in that.
So moved as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 3-0. Leroy, anything else from the airport this morning?
Nope, that's it for me.
When, just a question, this is gonna be somewhere in here, talks about timeline, but what is the timeline for that?
The runway, the markings, you mean, or the paper? I'm sorry.
You brought it up.
Okay, so the markings, I believe as usual, we've pushed those into the fall.
Yeah,
The beacon, we've asked if they can, it sounds like from Jason at Jacobs that the beacon parts, the actual hardware pole is going to be several months out, looking like probably mid-winter before they have that. But they've asked to have the infrastructure put in prior to, so when the beacon shows up, they can just stand it on the pole and hook up a couple of wires and move forward. So the one that might be a little more disruptive, we'll say, is going to be the pavement management survey, because that's going to require being out on the runway for some time. So as usual, we're pushing those back as far as we can. to keep them out of the season to obviously not disrupt as much of the normal operations as we can. So that will be fall also. Eventually, we'll see a contract or an agreement with Jacobs because they're going to do that survey. But according to Jason, he didn't have the agreement ready yet. So that will be in the future.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Is the beacon electrical infrastructure the actual beacon cost, Leroy?
Well, they've got to run power from the firehouse out to the site, which is going to be right down here by the firehouse. They've got to.
We're looking at the cost of this 172,000. I'm trying to find the actual cost of the beacon in the.
I don't think it was. I didn't see the actual breakdown of costs anywhere for the light itself. So I can't answer that question.
But this is the all-in cost,
Yeah, that's the all-in cost.
which includes the,
Evidently, yeah, somewhere
Yeah.
in the cost of the beacon, I guess.
And you know,
Okay.
it's typical procurement goes right now. There just isn't one. I guess they're looking at several weeks out before they can.
I call the vote on that, something right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Anything further, gentlemen, for Leroy? If not, Leroy, thank you.
Okay, and yeah, this works great for me because it saves me the hassle of driving through Route 3 to get down there for my 5 minutes or 10 minutes of fame.
But Leroy, because you drove, we put you first on the agenda and whatnot. Is that less critical now? Do you care when you show up?
No, I don't care. Whatever works good for you. I mean, I'm
Well, it's just that we tried to give you and Miller first dibs.
Right.
Anyways, so Rebecca, she'll consider that in the future.
Yeah, you can move me around wherever needed, and I'll work my way in.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Moving on, we'll go to maintenance. Good morning, Dennis.
Morning.
Dennis, finally, nice to finally see you in person.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine.
He looked a lot different 15 months ago.
Yeah, my wife has anything to do with it. That'll be corrected very soon.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Mm.
Gentlemen, you see before you have two personnel requests. The first is that the commissioner approved the promotion of Mike Marshall from custodian to crew leader position established a few short weeks ago.
And we approved that crew leader position at the last meeting, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
We approved.
So this is the final piece of that
Right.
puzzle.
So I'm going to move to approve the promotion of Mike Marshall from custodian to crew leader effective July 10th, 2021.
Seconded.
Any discussion, gentlemen? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 3-0.
And next, we had a departure for Gary Brooks a number of weeks ago. And so we have made the selection of Ramsey Abraham II. So I asked that the commissioners approve the promotion of Ramsey Abraham II from part-time to full-time janitor at, I believe it's grade 5, step C. And that step C is based on experience, not only experience in the industry, but actually experience in the courthouse for the county.
This is another good example, gentlemen, of the deviance from starting at A. This gentleman was part-time, and so he understands the process, and so we traditionally recognize that as justification for a step C.
Okay, so moved, effective July 17th, 2021.
Second,
So this is retroactive, right?
they will for this week.
Yeah.
3 days.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 3-0. Dennis, anything else from maintenance this morning?
No, that's it for me.
We're still waiting. You're still getting RFQs.
Yeah, the deadline was the 16th last Friday. We had 3 submissions. They're in the review process. One of the things that Scott and I talked about was waiting to have this discussion you're gonna have a little later today,
Maybe we talk about it then?
right, to talk about, the direction that the job and others might take and how we approach it at that point. I mean, I think having that information is gonna be very important in deciding how this goes forward.
Okay,
And I just wanted to say thank you, Dennis. I'm fairly new at this, and memos like this and your presentation really help. Really, thank you. It moves things along, and I appreciate it.
Well, thanks very much, and I, of course, Scott and Rebecca helped a great deal with that as well, so I'm also very pleased.
thank you, Dennis.
Yes.
Makes sense.
So, gentlemen, let's direct your attention to agenda item 7. Scott, the LD 32 on public proceedings.
Yeah,
I'd just like to, because not to keep you from making a long, in-depth presentation, but what you sent us was really helpful. And to me, it pointed out that we need I think you were going to get to needing a policy. We need a policy.
yeah, actually, by statute, we now need a policy, we need to hold a public hearing, and we
Yeah.
have this on record. You're exactly correct, Commissioner. And so what I sent you was, as I indicated, Ryan Pelletier from Aroostook County, my counterpart as an administrator up there. He's also the president of, what do they call it? Yeah, the president, I guess, of Maine, which is the county administrative group. He was kind of tasked through MCCA, the commissioners organization, to kind of come up with a template. He's pretty crafty with these things, so reluctantly he accepted. And this is what he sent. The only thing I didn't do was replace, Aroostook with Hancock, but I think that's really the important piece today is to discuss and see if for me, it did all the guidelines. I will say, just as a sidebar, as I indicated in my notes, some discussion in the municipal, the MTCA, Maine Town and City Managers Association, and like the email group chat conversation. Some feel it's a little too vague. Some feel that the legislature needs to do a better job at describing what's legal and what's not. So this is what we have to work with. And as you know, as my approach is, I'd rather have the ability to decide what works for us and to have somebody try to legislate common sense. So,
Well, I like this policy.
Yeah.
I think it needs to incorporate, what we're doing now,
I
a
think.
little better.
Oh, okay.
I think and I'm not in a hurry to do it because this is only our first try at this. And, we don't know how disruptive or not disruptive it is. So far it's working really good. But I think it's important. It's what's going to keep us out of, any potential trouble.
Mhm.
And, this, I have my notes here to thank Rebecca for that document and thank everybody who helped bring that to fruition because that's really helpful. Rebecca taught me yesterday that document can, you can click on the index she did and find the document, and that's really helpful. I think that also would help with transparency if that was on a website. So folks saw what we did, everybody's comfortable that everybody's seeing the same thing
Right.
at the same time. And, maybe that I bring that up because maybe that needs to be worked into this somehow.
Well, I think it is in there if you look, because by statute, we're really not supposed to bring anything unless, and that's where the vagueness for some becomes an issue, unless there are, extreme circumstances. Well, what is an extreme circumstance beyond a sickness, travel issues, weather? And so some want that more defined. I find that should be the responsibility of the body, of the commission to say within itself, if somebody is abusing that, then to kind of address that at that point.
Excuse me, are we talking about one of us attending remotely while the other two are in person.
Well,
Correct.
Actually, I think we're talking about that as well as, documents.
Correct.
So, yeah, I know in Bar Harbor, we had rules of order and it defined some of this stuff. You can go overboard with definitions because they can be constricting,
Right.
but, like, it would not be hard to define, what, what document can be, let's say we post what Rebecca,
Right.
and something comes in like it did today.
Right.
I think in this policy, there should be provisions for that to happen if it meets certain criteria. That's 2 sentences.
Right.
So I don't need to belabor this, but I think this is great. I think this is needed. And, I'd like to make, today is not a day to make those suggestions, but I'd like to make a couple suggestions on defining things like I've just mentioned. And I think the next step for this is maybe for us to take action, asking the administrator to put our name on this and put his ideas in this, so that we have a rough draft to mark up and make suggestions on.
Well, I think by general consensus, we'd ask you to develop a policy for us to review and
Yeah.
take action, With regard to remote attendance, though, I mean, the LD talks about if there is remote attendance, you have to call a roll call. So
Exactly.
it appears that even the LD is allowing remote attendance for some, if not all of us. So
Yeah, I read that portion. I'm not so keen on remote attendance for commissioners. Because that, especially a body that's this small, because the meeting could change if it needed to.
Yeah.
So, but the important part for me is what's happening, and that it is happening transparently, but not everybody thinks that or knows that or, so.
But we need to make it practical and reasonable and whatnot. And you're a good example. We'll say today there was a warning, they're moving the MRI building to the island.
Yeah.
Don't try to get off the island because you can't get there.
Right.
So,
We could define an emergency.
yeah, Paul says,
Well,
I'm going to be remotely and John and I are here in person and I'd like to be able, we have the technology, I think. It's a little cumbersome on that, I think, to have the third commissioner on that, but we have the technology. So I think keeping it practical, and emergency may be a little too stringent, but for what, for good cause, whatever,
Well,
so.
Here's what I've seen other bodies do is, the folks that are there actually vote on it. So there's a record of, let's take that example. I don't show up, I call in, hey, I can't make it. Well, then the body can still meet because there's 2 of you. And then you take a vote to allow or disallow me from participating remotely based on what, that way it's each individual, it's codified in the minutes that what happened.
I think for me, that bench is a little dangerous for me. And I think every concern that I've heard so far is addressed in here, in my opinion. So like if you take a look at, right off the conditions and requirements, members of the body, elected officials are expected to be physically present for public proceedings except when physically present is not practical.
That's practical is the word.
Yeah, so
And circumstances include emergency situations, illness, physical condition, temporary absence from the jurisdiction. Even to the area of the public's body's jurisdiction includes geographic characteristics that impede or slow travel. So your MRI building.
So
For me, if I could just take another second, for me to describe your scenario, for me, it would be, one is taking advantage of this rule and the other 2 feel that that's, I think then that becomes a discussion amongst the commission. And then at that point, if this doesn't cover it and you wish to cover it, then you address it via here rather than an individual vote for each circumstance. I think you need to stick with a policy that covers.
I agree. We're actually in agreement.
Okay.
Because all that motion would say is meets the definition of, I'm trying to find which number, but
Yeah.
a number 10 in our policy or number 3 in our policy.
Right.
That's it. I'm not, I don't, that's all I'm saying, just so that it's addressed.
You know, I also think, you know, like number 9 in here, to me,
Yes,
covers the documents that
right,
if it says right here, it has to be made public.
right.
So, I mean,
So the circumstance today, or the great example of today is, with EMA and Director Sankey bringing this document in. And if that was not in the scan file, so for any member of public that wished to see it that was not physically here, how would we do that? And in this circumstance, I mean, I addressed it with Andy when he sent that, and I said, if you have anything that should be submitted, it was already after the file. We could, I know Rebecca or I can certainly bring it up on our screen and it would, so that the public could see it. If they wanted a physical copy, they could be, it could be sent electronically to them to avoid postage and printing charges. So, again, I think, and as long as we don't continue to make it a habit, I mean.
And again, we're all in agreement, I think, like 9 addresses it.
Wait a minute, I'm having a problem. It's just a kind of a personal technical thing with me. I'm having a problem that if I find it practical to meet remotely, that I need your approval to do that. I'm a commissioner. I have all the rights of all the commission and whatnot. The law allows one practical situation. I'd like to see the policy say that if the remaining people in attendance on the board believe it's not practical, they have to make a decision not to allow me to attend, as opposed to taking a vote saying that, yes, you can come in. I think I should be welcomed unless somebody raises cause that I'm not being practical with my remote attendance, raising the issue. In other words, it's accepted that I declare remote attendance and you people accepted the fact it was practical unless you have cause to believe it wasn't. So
Oh, I'm not, I see your point. I can't imagine, all I'm trying to do is just reflect in the minutes, that's what's happened.
Right,
That's all.
so I'm a little confused, Cherokee. So are you agreeing with Commissioner?
no, I'm
Yeah.
saying it's just the opposite. In other words, if we have a commissioner meeting remotely and they tell us why they're meeting, and if the remaining board that is present say, I'm not sure that meets the practicality standard, and they want to raise that issue, it must be raised at that time. Because if you don't raise it, there is an acceptance that it is practical and they are attending the meeting. I'm just concerned, Paul, I have 40 years of history with this board, and I can see how that could be abused. And so I'd like to.
I see your point. All I'm looking for is just a way to reflect it in the minutes, that's what's happening. That's all.
well, in the minutes, obviously, we're always going to have the beginning of our minutes, we always essentially say who's in attendance, right?
Correct.
So obviously for the last year and a half, we've been saying we're meeting regularly via Zoom. Well, in those circumstances, we'll dictate exactly how everybody's meeting. And I think you're right in that if it becomes an issue where we have to disqualify someone's attendance, that'll happen at the beginning of the meeting because that's when we essentially establish who's here.
Nobody establishes a disqualification, it's just accepted
Yeah.
that remote is, that commissioner attending remotely is part of the meeting.
Yeah. The only reason I was bringing it up is just so it's reflected in the minutes sometime, like in Bar, if somebody was absent, we always had excused absences, and you had to have an excuse. I never, ever, ever saw an instance in 13 years where somebody wasn't excused. But you're right that, if everybody wasn't getting along or whatever, that could be an issue. I'm sure there's a way.
I do think the policy should say that if you're going to meet remotely, you have to give cause for why you're meeting remotely. So that the other two commissioners understand why and whatnot. And it may help us establish a standard for what is practical. But I'm still concerned that there is going to be an actual vote to allow me to attend as opposed to a vote that says you can't because this is impractical while you're out there.
How about this, because right now we're talking you know, what could happen. How about, how we move forward is we ask the administrator to, you know, make this apply to us. That way that we have a draft based on what we've talked about. We can present any, you know, any amendments or ideas, you know, at that meeting, and then the subsequent meeting, we approve what we edited.
Yeah, you'll have to have a public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the document. So prepare something to present at the public hearing. You can have it during the, you know, regular commissioner meeting and then approve it afterwards.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking is, we see a draft.
Yep.
We discuss the draft, any edits, that generates a second draft that's ready for public hearing, and
Correct.
that's just, you know, I think before we schedule public hearings, we need a,
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that's, yes. So I think it's part of the conversation right now.
Don't you think we could
So I'm,
have whatever changes that we think are necessary sent to us as emails so that we could just have the public hearing at the next meeting?
if you come to an agreement on, yeah, if you come to a consensus on a document that's,
Yeah.
that's ready for it, and we average public hearing is what, back, is it 10 days?
I'm not sure.
It might be a notification
Okay.
issue for,
Okay.
yeah, so it may have to wait till the
Might have to
following
be a
meeting.
month.
I don't see a I like the idea of discussing a draft and then,
Yeah, so let's see if we can get something together, then the next meeting, and
We'll
we'll
look
check on
at that.
guidelines for public meeting, get refreshed on that, and then we'll go from there.
yeah.
And you're sure that the process says that you have a draft that you give to the public for the hearing as opposed to having adopted a policy that you ask the public to comment on?
Well, I think that's one, I'm guessing it's one and the same, is that you're gonna want not a draft, but a policy that you finalize to introduce to the public.
That's, what- yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and then they may come up with something, you go, oh, man, never thought of that.
Yeah, and then
And
maybe we
you
have to.
adapt it then, and then you may have to come back and
So,
reaffirm it.
so we're gonna, at some point, we're going to approve a policy.
Yes,
And at that point, we'll send that, we'll present that to the public for comment.
right, you'll approve a copy for public hearing approval, yeah, a policy, yeah.
And my guess is somebody will do a quick review to make sure that it, you know, jives with the statute. I'm sure that's already been done here.
Yeah, aside from knowing Ryan's talents, reading through this and looking at it was done, I thought, pretty spot on. I haven't heard any, and there's been a lot of conversation about it. I haven't heard anything else. The only thing, again, I'm sorry, but I am still, so you want to see something in there for approval, kind of an excused absence
No,
approval?
just
No,
about-
okay,
I want to see, the only thing I want to see in there by vote is just cause for not allowing the remote attendance.
Well, how about we don't do anything and we leave it as it is?
well,
I don't know how it is in here, but I think that if I want to attend remotely, I should at least tell the rest of the board why I'm attending remotely. And
Yes.
you're reassured that it's a practical reason.
yes,
Because if you say, wait a minute, that is so impractical, I'm going to contest that, and you can have a vote whether or not you want to allow the person meeting. What's the difference?
well, no, just to say, I don't think the other two commissioners have the right in the statute to do that.
No. That's probably,
Oh,
Correct.
you
I don't think-
gotta check
well, I
that,
mean,
because
they-
here's the problem.
Well, I can ask legal, yeah, I mean.
Here's the problem, because if that turns out to be impractical by somebody's definition, any action that was taken during that meeting could be determined to be void. So in other words, if the remote guy and John, I remote and John approved something that Paul
Right.
objected to, and it turned out that I was impractical, that vote is null and void.
Yeah, we'll have to ask legal on that one, but, first off, I would hope that my commission would not act in that manner. I would think the public would not, but I know what you're gonna say, but, because that's exactly what I would say is, so if, you know, because if you start playing that's a dangerous slope where you can get a little personal.
And that's the danger that I'm want to avoid in having to approve somebody's remote attendance right off the bat.
Maybe there's a way to insert something. I'll check with Bear and see if there's a way to do something to cover that, if that's what you want me to do.
well, here. I'm reading the,
And that probably goes back to part of the concern with others in conversations about the vagueness of, you know, practical excuses. or say excuses or practical reasons for not attending. You know, for me, it would be, his scenario would be is even if you do I woke up with a bellyache, I really don't feel like going at it. Okay, well, that's a personal responsibility to your constituents. You do it 6-7 weeks in a row, even less than that, four meetings in a row. Then I think the other two are starting to have conversations, and somewhere in there's a conversation that says, well, maybe we need to
And that
readdress
could get a
that.
little sticky wicky though. I mean,
Yeah.
Paul this morning took 20 to 30 minutes longer getting here than he anticipated. So Paul says, in the month of July and August, I'm going to be remotely because traveling there is just, is that practical?
No, but the responsible thing to do would be to say, Paul, if he felt like that was really the best option for him, would be to say to the other two, would you mind if that's what I did? Or I'm going to make best effort. So maybe I don't make 2 meetings a month. Maybe I hit the first, and then if the other two agree. Again, we go back to communication and respect. But I'll check with Bear to see how we can avoid that situation.
Unfortunately, I'm raising issues that I don't think this particular board would ever have. I mean,
I agree.
But again, historically,
Mhm.
and Jennifer Osborne knows exactly what I'm talking about. This could very well
Well,
have occurred. So,
that's not a board I wish to work for, so.
Well, you
Anyway,
you did.
but I did make changes, so.
Okay, I think he has enough direction to get us something.
And to reading the statute, I think answers a lot of the questions we're
Okay.
discussing. And I'm gonna have to read it a few more. I read it a few times and I have to read it a few more times after hearing this discussion, to see if that.
Yeah, send us your questions and, we'll get,
But again, I think this is great. I think he covered a lot.
okay.
It's vague in a couple of places, but may need to be because of what we've talked about.
Big thanks goes to Ryan. I mean, I think you did an excellent job in really taking the statute, and really.
So you provided us with the LD, but I take it that they approved the LD in form.
I believe the LD is, the only thing I'm not sure is when it exactly takes effect, whether it went through emergency or whether it went through regular. But.
No, it says in the preamble until 90 days. An act.
It does, but I'm also hearing through scuttlebutt that it was pushed through emergency, with all the chaos down there, so.
Oh,
I do need to check on that.
See,
But in any event, we won't make the emergency, but we'll do our best practice and get it done.
because it says here, number 2, public body subject to this subchapter may allow members of the body to participate in a public proceeding using remote methods only under the following conditions.
Right.
After notice and hearing of the body has adopted a written policy, that's why we're talking about this.
Mhm.
And then it talks about what the excuses are. Policy in B, 1, 2, 3, 4. So all I was envisioning was somebody to make a motion that says he can be in remote based on B1. Period. Okay. Because it meets one of those definitions. It's not keeping him out. It's.
Let's do the justification.
It's just a justification. It's in the minutes. We dealt with it. That was the only reason I was bringing this up.
Okay.
And maybe it just means that language comes into the policy. Maybe that's the answer.
I think it would be good practice to identify the reason as to why.
Absolutely.
But it's, the vote I get a little hesitant on.
Okay,
What
yeah,
if you get a negative vote? That takes us back to the scenario that
Yeah.
Mr. Clark's talking about.
And I think that's going to happen because I want to meet remotely for whatever reason. And I think it follows, it's practical under the criteria.
Right.
I'm going to show up on Zoom, right at my desk and whatnot. And then I'm going to tell you that I need to meet remotely for this reason.
Right.
It's an emergency, you know what I mean?
Right.
And at that point, if you gentlemen collectively believe it's practical, we just move on.
Right.
But if you think it's impractical, then you have to take maybe perhaps some action to avoid taking action here that would become null and void because I was remotely for an impractical reason.
Yeah, so maybe it isn't a motion, maybe this is in the policy. And when you come on, you say, I want to meet because
Right.
remotely because of this.
Right.
And then if there's an argument, then it's up to the people who are arguing to make a case.
And I would think that, of course, it would be done as much in advance as possible.
Yeah, of course.
Either, myself, Rebecca, in the chair, or all three, or,
Yeah.
And that would really be the way to do it, is to tell you that I need to meet remotely because I'm in
Right.
Florida on
Right.
vacation.
Right,
You know what I mean? And I can't attend.
right.
So
And it may even be advance notice.
that's what I mean. I tell you 2 weeks ahead of time, or I tell the board today, gentlemen, in 2 weeks from now, when we have a regular meeting, I'm gonna be in Florida on vacation, but I'd like to attend remotely.
Right,
So I'm, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you know ahead of time and
because it gives the board a chance to possibly pick a different date. If it's
Yeah,
not
or-
regularly scheduled, but.
and they might say to you, I'm not sure that's a practical reason. No, I think it is.
Yeah, I think it says temporary, temporary removal from a body's jurisdiction, or jurisdiction of body.
Area of public.
Temporary absence, I'm sorry.
Geographic characteristics, you know.
Number 2, illness or other physical condition. 4, temporary absence from the jurisdiction of the body that causes a member of the body to face significant difficulties traveling to and attending a
Oh,
person.
God, Paul, there's 4. It says because of slow travel.
Yeah.
There you go, buddy. See you next fall.
Now, if you try to pull that you're gonna spend summers in Florida, I don't think that's practical.
Yeah, okay, I think we discussed it. I think we really have a good idea what we want to
Yeah,
say this
just-
policy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and anything that we say in the policy should come from here because it really,
So I'm gonna check with legal on that situation that we talked about with regards to whether there is actually any power for the other two to,
I'm not sure that that's necessary, but if
if you can give me some sort of consensus, or
you,
are you all set with that now, Commissioner Clark? Or-
What am I also?
Are you all set with your concern over, whether the other two commissioners actually have power?
If we don't have the policy where you have to approve the remote app, I don't care what else is in it.
yeah,
So we don't.
Yeah, I don't-
If
I
you
don't
don't
think
want
it's an
anything in there that says, we're gonna take a vote that this isn't, I guess that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still concerned because the statute says all actions are null and void if it's a result of impractical remote attendance, so.
I'll try this scenario without going to legal first and see what I get for response.
Okay. All right, we look forward then to the next draft.
Good.
Let's move on to an update with our finance position. Scott.
Yeah, so we actually met with an individual a couple of times. I called the individual in to kind of discuss the opportunity. They were still seriously interested. And those, I guess the best way I can put it is those talks are still currently in progress. When the applicant went back to their current employer, that kind of gave you, that's the best reference I think you can get. It's the current employer doesn't want to lose the individual. So,
So the ball's in her court now is to.
The ball is in her-
She wants a job.
yeah.
So at some point you'll be coming back and asking us if she says, okay, I want the job, to approve her for this position.
Yes,
but we're not there yet.
no.
But do you think we're at the point of where we're ready to hire somebody?
The
Well,
action we've taken.
I'd kind of like to know if not, because, yeah,
Well, I mean.
I don't want to go
do
too
you-
much. Yeah.
And this is not, I've said this to Scott 100 times, I'm still fuzzy about what she's going to actually do for work. And so I'm not sure, it may be a work in progress once she gets here, Scott.
Mhm. Well, again, I think that's, no disrespect, but I think that's, kind of my bailiwick I'm probably the best one to know what needs to be done in that office. Do I need 3 full-time people? I would say openly, no. But as I've explained, we've got some changes coming in the near future. If I have the opportunity to grab the right person, and this one is going to require a little more, time and training, then I would come back to you and, see about making that happen, but.
So that's the question, gentlemen. Are we ready to approve a hire based upon the fact that Scott is going to bring this person in and develop their duties and responsibilities once she gets here?
I would argue we've taken action to say yes.
Yeah, I would say yes also. And I think obviously when we get to the point where we're actually talking about hiring somebody, hire, we'll have
Yeah.
the job description to some degree right there, when we're making the approval.
Yep, as the duties, really have already been established.
Yeah, but I just mean like,
Yeah.
it'll all be laid out as to what the duties are, and how they're gonna be developed.
We had a draft job description, didn't we?
We did, well, we were kind of working with two, depending on the individual coming in, as to whether I found a full-fledged finance director and both, especially experienced in county government, they could go off and run it.
Well, I think based upon John's comments and whatnot, you should take those two, refine it into one and present that to us along with the, request to hire.
Mhm. Yeah, I can do, should this become successful, I can kind of merge that in, yeah. And again, I would just tell you, would lean more towards the finance director position with, just kind of, needs to be some training and some connection with what the individual currently does, and, turning around to county government. So,
Well, if she says, yes, I want the job, then come back and of course fill the other two in on.
Yeah.
I already know about her background and her history and her
Already got it.
credentials.
Yeah.
Good. So we'll, like I say, it's the ball's in her court.
Yeah.
We'll wait to hear from her. And
Yeah.
if we don't, maybe no news is not good
Yeah.
news. So,
yeah, well, I told the applicant I was on vacation this week and that
so maybe give it one.
they didn't really have to, rush, but I'm keeping an eye on my emails. I know Rebecca's in on the loop, so if she hears something, I'm sure she'll reach out to me.
Very good then. I guess that's where we stand on that. Is there anything to update us on our COVID policy? Are we getting close to being back to normal?
Yeah, I think the only normal is and actually it barely existed pre-pandemic, was having the security down the State Street entrance. We put the readers, Dennis, we put the readers on the door and they're active for employees. The public just can't use that stairwell by Rebecca's office. Because they still want them to use the elevator and they can use the back. Can they go all the way to the top on the back stair? I don't believe they can they? I think they've still got tape over there. So for me, it's, I think by the time I return next week, and I'll see if I'll send an email to Travis, Travis, we're planning on, especially at least the back stairwell, the public ought to be able to traverse those stairwells.
I don't know when they were doing the State Street entry, whether there were more people using that because they can't use the stairwell they are, but anecdotally, the marshals are telling me that the most boring position right now is coming off the elevator.
Yeah.
Because so few people come there. In fact, they're making that just a 2-hour stint and because nobody comes. Now, evidently coming through the State Street must have been more busy. Nobody complained about that being,
It wasn't terribly busy.
it wasn't. Huh? Well,
What they did was screen our visitors as well.
yeah.
So that was the benefit that we saw. But court traffic, no, it's probably similar.
What we've done is we've actually kind of, and probate, took a big run of this, is we've actually trained a lot of people that they can't go through there any longer. So they don't even come in through State Street entrance any longer. So they just go right up top. And I don't believe the courts are even close to, I don't see traffic out here, pre-pandemic, or I don't know where the courts are exactly at in their game plan, the number of people physically here, but
Look for something ahead of the month.
that's what I would guess, is that it's gonna start ramping up and then, so if they're covering the elevator, my thought, unless Travis tells me for some other reason not to, then why not the State Street entrance? The only difference before was a differential in mask requirements, and I think we're pretty darn close enough now.
Well, of course, if I was the court system, it's one thing to be able to accommodate the county by conducting the security as they help them. But the problem is that if they do the State Street entrance and somebody comes up in the sheriff's department, gets on the elevator, they can get into the court system without going through security. So there is a problem there. Now, if they continue to only monitor at the elevator, they're not doing us any security, but at least they're making their entrances 100% secure.
Right.
So I would think from selfish standpoints that they would want to keep that upstairs and not down the State Street. So
I don't think elevator traffic prior was a big issue. It doesn't sound like it is even currently.
It's always been a weak spot, as you point out, but no, it was when they,
Yeah,
based on the traffic that happened, they were not overly concerned about it.
yeah, good.
And their staffing issues are such that their position was any day we do screening is better than non-screening.
Mhm.
And it gets people used to the idea that they might be screened. So that in itself might be some measure of.
Okay, the other issue that I understand may have come up is employees still continuing to work remotely.
yes, and I believe that there was one department that was, I'm not sure, wasn't in complete understanding. But at this point in time, I believe they're in compliance.
And it's our understanding that nobody's to meet remotely anymore. Everybody's to attend, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, so that shouldn't be an issue. Now everybody understands what the policy is. So is there anything else with regard to our operations?
Well,
So Dennis?
I was just curious. So all the restrictions we have on the stairwells, like, what's the practical part of that in terms of like safety, in terms of people being able to exit the building?
Well, I believe the one,
Great question.
that is a great question. That was part of the concern of when this was first happening, but the back stairwell, which essentially the fire escape, that's always been, that's not physically locked upstairs.
No, to get into the
That's,
escape.
it's got a tape across it.
And that
It's
actually
across
fixed
the
that
tape.
lock, so that's all set
Okay,
too. But the idea is that whenever you get in the stairwell, you can exit the building.
Right.
You can leave. You might not have access back in through certain areas.
But you can't get into the stairwell from this floor.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't. You had to use your
Oh,
badge
no,
yesterday.
no, right, the middle stairwell, yeah.
right, yeah.
So why can't we have that accessible so that you can at least get out, but you can't get back in from downstairs? If you can take the elevator and go down the elevator and get out of the building, why can't you take the downstairs and get out of the building? What's the security issue of not allowing somebody from this floor to the next floor down using the stairwell?
I believe that's the orientation of the lock.
And what's that mean?
The lock's locked from the outside in, so it allows, if you're in the stairwell, I think you can come in.
Yeah.
You can in, but you can't get from this floor down the
Right.
stairwell, and I see no need of that.
So you're saying unlock the top
Unlock the
door?
upstairs so you
Upstairs.
can, and safety purposes. For some reason we have a fire, don't use the elevator.
Yeah,
If they want to use that stairwell
Right.
as the quickest way out of the building, they can't get to it. They can't get down the stairs. So Dennis, please consider and talk to whoever, Scott or whoever, whatnot, consider unlocking that door and make that accessible downstairs.
Yeah.
Leaving the one on the downstairs locked so you can't come up.
yeah, well, that's
At
kind of
least
a
you
great
could
point.
win.
We have had a provisional protocol regarding directing people to other stairwells because of that concern. I'd be perfectly happy with leaving it open. I think now that you're not gonna get pedestrian traffic into that stairwell and up into the second floor because of the reader down below, so I have no objection.
So you can always get out of it.
That's always true, yes.
Yeah, but I think he's right. If we unlock
I think that'd be okay, yeah.
so that anybody can use, you don't have to use your reader to get into the stairwell to go downstairs.
Right.
And is that our decision to make, or is that the courts?
We are the ones that insisted on locking that. In other words, we wanted to keep court people at the time, we were locked down from getting,
Oh, back then.
traveling down into
Right.
our area. And when we had the mask discrepancy, we reversed that from the first floor up to the second. But at this point, it's
Well, just to cover all the bases though, and And if we decide to unlock that door on this floor going down the stairwell, and let Jeff or Travis or somebody,
Yeah, we'll touch base.
yeah, just let them know, because they shouldn't have any concern. It
I
has
don't
nothing
think
to
they
do with their
would.
security.
No.
And it should help their safety.
Yeah.
Oh, they might say, well, somebody will go downstairs and let somebody in that's not supposed to be. Well, you got the back entrance, you can go up anyways.
Well, yeah, that's true in a number of places, yes. We're only compliance away. I mean, you go in the stairwell, hold the door open, down to the bed, let someone in all the way up,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
fire escape.
Okay.
You know,
All right, Kitty's here, we had at 10 o'clock, we have one more item, I think it could be a quicker, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Dennis, we're all set?
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Let's deal with this county website video. Rebecca, is that you?
Sure, I can talk about that. So we have these, really quickly, we have these 4 videos on our website that sort of showcase Hancock County. We were approached by CGI Communications out of New York to get these videos on the website. Essentially, it's an advertising tactic for them. And, you know, in turn, we do get these very nice videos. But it was, and as you can see in my memo and in Scott's notes, it was problematic because of the, because of the tactics that they were using with local businesses in order to get, their name out there. So it's time to renew that contract again, if you want to. They're pushing pretty hard for us to renew that. And I told them I can't, make that decision without bringing it.
Do they know that we're unhappy with their heavy-handed, high-pressure sales?
They should, unless they don't keep good notes, because Scott had a conversation with them about it a couple of years ago when.
And it didn't seem to help? No.
It kind of settled a little bit at first. There were a couple of emails afterwards. They were still kind of continuing, and I reached out. Then it kind of went quiet. We never heard much after that. But one of the other common ones was from these businesses is, why don't we have somebody, find somebody local to do it? And it really, I'll tell you, it really was some very unfriendly tactics used that did not, the commission was not represented well by this project. Yeah.
One strike and you're out.
Yeah.
I was one of the businesses that,
Oh,
I think
I think you did call me.
that's how I first
Think
met
about
you.
it.
But, so, having been on the other end of that phone, I'm gonna make a motion not to renew it.
Yeah.
But I have a couple questions. The videos that are on our website, do we own those or do they own those?
They own those.
Okay, do we need those videos?
I don't think so. I mean,
So, to be honest, to me, if we needed videos, I would like to work with local talent. But I'm not seeing the need, and I'm not sure that we need to address that today. I think the only thing that needs to be addressed is whether to renew this contract. Is that a fair?
Yep.
Assumption?
Well, I think that wouldn't hurt to have that part of the motion, that we don't renew the contract and that we don't pursue videos for our website anymore.
well, you may want to at some
I
point.
know it, but and when we do, I think you should be coming back to us and say, we found a good company, they're putting out a good product. Let's consider this again, because you just said a minute ago that you didn't think the videos were necessary.
Well, I don't know how much, I don't know how much traffic they get. I don't know how many people view them. They're very nice, but.
Can we just leave the issue then? In other words, we just vote not to sign the contract with them and just leave the issue for the time being.
And, to be honest, if we found videos that we needed, I'm sure Ellsworth or Bar Harbor or any of these other towns could probably provide us something that they paid for, maybe not, but just.
Yeah, well, I think if we, if you vote not to, to not renew the contract and it goes off the website, if it really created a lot of interest, we'll hear about it.
Yeah.
Because I want to know where it went. Well, you're going to replace it. What are you going to do? And so.
And then we'll deal with
And
it.
then we'll
then.
address, we would address it, right?
Okay, so I'm gonna move to not renew the contract with CGI Communications.
Any further with regards to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion carries 3-0. Okay, let's move now to a discussion with ARP funds. Good morning, Kerry.
Morning. No break first?
No, we're so excited.
I wouldn't know where to go, so.
You know, I meant to tell you where the mention is. Everybody doesn't know what it is. Kitty, is there a Y on your name or an IE?
Why?
A Y, thank you.
Although I probably do answer to almost anything.
Well, I think I have you IE on my email address, but Y on my.
If I get the Sullivan Bridge, it's Miss Kitty. That's how I grew up. That's how they know me.
Miss Kitty.
Miss Kitty. All right. So if it makes sense, maybe just review where we are to date before we start to jump in and talk about brainstorming. Hi, Jennifer.
Sorry.
We tried. We did try. Okay, so yeah, from our last meeting, the things that we worked on, we have already put up a webpage. Hopefully you guys have seen that. You
Yeah.
should have seen that.
Did you do any advertising or did we do any, because I'm getting, well, you've seen
Right,
it. Yeah.
so, no, so.
You've seen it already.
So Jennifer and I have been playing phone tag so that she could kind of be brought into the loop and help get the word out that that was actually there. So unless she's already done that, I don't know that that's happened. So, but we are already getting hits on it, but I am not getting those emails.
So,
Yeah.
so on a practical note, it sounds like most of those are because I shared it on my commissioner page yesterday.
Oh, good.
So, because I don't think there had been any before we did that.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, no,
If you
they all
have-
came at once. Yeah.
a Facebook page as a commissioner, personally, you might share it on there.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you about the practical side of one of the problems.
So the webpage is.
Posting the link.
Yeah, so the webpage is just allowing people to come in, put in their contact information and any ideas that they have about how these funds could be dispersed. So that is going to Rebecca, Scott, and myself when it's working. I'm not actually getting those at this point. So that will start to begin to populate a list for us to pre-review and then to maybe act on or vote on from the commissioner's standpoint.
Okay, so that link is on the county website
Correct.
currently. And John, what you did is you just posted that link.
Yeah, I shared the link. So, you know, if you want to contribute, if you want to have a voice on what we're doing, you know, go to the link.
Maybe we ought to talk after the meeting.
Yeah, we need lessons.
Yeah,
By the
you
way.
might have to get some Facebook lesson there.
We also included a lot of resource federally for people to click on that they can look at if they want a 51-page document or whatnot. So there's good resources for people to review at that point as well.
So, okay, I'm really kind of curious, though, you had 6 or 7 people.
Yeah, summary, yeah.
What are they saying? Just, are they suggesting,
Yeah.
making suggestions?
Yeah.
And you haven't gotten that list yet?
For some reason, I keep getting this on the email. We thought it might go into my spam and it's not.
It's
So
not, okay.
I think they just got to tweak it on
Might
their
be an
end.
email issue or email address,
Yeah.
you know, typing or something.
Yeah.
I just looked real quick.
Yeah, so
I'm kind of curious on what they asked, but maybe I'm jumping the gun here.
Rebecca probably can.
Yeah,
sort of review it with us.
one of the main topics I would say, just right off the top of my head was, hazard pay. Or hazard pay, there was one in there regarding, an effective, livable wage. The whole conversation itself. There's one in there with regards to the Bar Harbor Airport, DOT, the new entrance, to realign the entrance. Broadband, yeah, broadband is, and that was coming in the last 2 or 3, is really popular.
Yeah,
Are you
those are,
looking for those, Joe?
Just looking at the comments that have come in, I'm not receiving them, but they were just curious what sort of
Okay.
comments are being received.
And you're saving those, Rebecca, you have those somewhere, those comments?
Yes, they really just started coming in. I mean, it's been up for a while, but they just
I don't know
started.
if you heard the comment that John posted to his commissioner, web. You heard that?
I actually spoke with him yesterday.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so he thinks that might have generated.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what did it, yeah.
and it's, I just looked at the webpage, it's pretty prominent.
Yeah, Yeah, they did a nice job. Yeah.
And I think that covers the transparency, right, and seeking public support on
Yeah,
this. So,
there's good links in there.
Yeah.
They're good to kind of see where
Yeah.
money's going all across the country.
Yeah.
How it's being divvied up. So
Exactly.
it's good.
yeah, you can look up any state, see how much they're getting in the
Yeah, so
county.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody's interested, they can really do some research there. So go ahead.
I'm sorry. So we talked about, you may have already said this, creating a spreadsheet.
Yeah, so I've started working on a spreadsheet, so every inquiry will then populate the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet will sort of be a, yes, commissioners have reviewed, or it's been pre-screened, or it's ready for a vote. So every single idea will initially go onto the spreadsheet. Some may go forward, some may not. For example, if one of those doesn't even meet base criteria, it might not go any further. But you could review the complete list at any time if you wanted to see it.
Public have access to that? Does the public have?
We haven't done that. I was going to put it on a shared drive with Rebecca and Scott, and
The only reason is I'm thinking that, let's say, for example, the entrance to the new entrance to the airport doesn't apply, that doesn't meet it. That might, if we posted that and the public could see that, that would avoid perhaps suggestions that is similar to that in the future.
unless it puts them in a spiral of argument.
Yeah, that's what that was one of my concerns.
What's
more
that?
That, you know,
They just want to argue the point. Why isn't this eligible, or it should be eligible, or?
yeah,
But at some point, you're gonna have, I see what you're saying, so,
Yeah, I mean, the quick response to that would be is the airport has its own funding.
yeah, or,
I mean,
yeah, that deals with
separate,
that one, but. there's-
separate pot of gold, separate,
Right.
yeah.
But
Right.
my concern would be some of the ones that, more social issues
Right,
versus
well, yeah,
infrastructure, those could really get into it.
I think the best thing would be to avoid the conversation as much as possible. Again, the spreadsheet would kind of,
Yeah.
would represent the commissioner's overall
Yeah.
short reasoning, not to say
Okay,
that it could be
so
reconsidered.
at this point, though, you are gonna put those on, then you're gonna give us your opinion as to whether or not they qualify.
I'm going to call it a pre-screen and say, this is iffy, this is a definite no, this is a definite yes, and it could roll up to you.
Okay,
There may be some that need further research. For example, the idea that Scott has brought up, maybe you could update on. We've done a couple of queries on that, no responses of now.
Talking about the old jail building?
Yeah, no,
Yeah, or-
the elevator, right?
Oh, the elevator, yeah, well, I haven't received a definite answer on that. Again, I don't think we're gonna get official blessing at this point.
Treasury came back and said, yeah, here's the regulations. I mean, that was basically their answer. So their hands off, I think, is the answer we got
Right.
there is
Right,
they're not going to get into those, the minutia, right? They said, yeah, read page, whatever. So Scott went to Matt from the state, or
from
from
NACO,
NACO,
yeah,
the current president of NACO,
right, the former,
Yeah.
former president, yeah.
and still waiting on a response, although he
I
did
am,
say he would dig into it.
Yeah, I think he's pushed it off to treasury officials who are probably, it's on a pile on. So I was gonna give him till after vacation and check and see if it's getting any.
why doesn't that make us feel very nervous? That they're gonna give us $10 million to go spend it, but if you spend it inappropriately, you gotta pay it back. But we're not gonna tell you whether or not it's appropriate until you spend it. Holy cow, what an awful process.
It is, but I think again, it's a recognition of responsibility to a body that should be able to absorb that responsibility and heavy checks and balances. But
Yeah, but it comes down to opinions.
well, I mean, for that one, so you can say opinion, fact, I think facts more on that one, two ends of the spectrum. That project, the renovation or addition to the new entrance, to me, I don't even question it. I don't personally, I don't question that, and I think if you looked at the rules, there'd be plenty that could point to that being a viable candidate. However, the other discussion is the other idea with, possibility of an EOC in the old jail spot, if that was to develop, well, I'll even say that one is quite a stretch. That one I would like to have a little more, or I would like to at least have somebody say, not to get a response other than, no, I wouldn't do that. Or, no, it doesn't.
Well, let's back up though. We are spending some time and effort right now serious about this new elevator shaft and the entrance down here. So are you as comfortable, and I don't want to put you on the spot with Scott setting here, but are you as comfortable as he is that this does meet the criteria?
The price tag is automatically going to make me less comfortable, right? The higher the price, the less the comfort level.
Because that could be 2 mil, right, Dennis? I mean,
Right.
or more than that.
So I think it'd be great if we could get that. This absolutely fits. But if you go back, it says they also include capital investment in public facilities to meet pandemic operational needs, such as physical plant improvements to hospitals, health clinics, or adaptations to public buildings to implement COVID-19 mitigation tactics. So we take adaptations to public buildings to implement these mitigation tactics, and that's the basis, and we explain that very clearly.
And do you feel comfortable that you can come up with a very plausible explanation?
I feel Scott has got a good foundation for that already.
Well, that would be what the process is all about.
Right.
So, once we get that list, then that's when we have that argument. Because, have arguments, use a harsh word like argument, but it's a discussion around each topic. You almost need them all so that you can say this one's feasible or not, or.
So really, this is the pre-screen to say, yes, it's worthy of that discussion.
Yeah.
And hopefully maybe some support from other resources.
Well, process-wise, though, you have two choices. You can get them all, you can get all your options on the table, start discussing them, or you can discuss them as you think are plausible, just like this one. In other words, I would like to see some in-depth discussion about whether or not we want to do this, get the RFQs in, perhaps talk to, I'd like to really go to work on this with the idea that this may be one of our highest priorities. And
Right, because you've already gone into the RFQ process, and we have those. The next step would be to approve one of them.
yeah, I know you can't have a list of priorities until you have your list, but nevertheless, I just feel like this is the best way to use those funds to accomplish something that we probably would not raise money for without those funds. I can't see asking for a bond for $3 million to do that job down there. So.
No, well, and to me, the measuring stick is, does it benefit everybody in the county? Because we have a fiduciary responsibility to the county, not individual points of view. So but again, for me to say, oh yeah, I'm all over this one, I'd have to see what it's knocking out. Or what it's.
Right.
Doing this is making.
Right.
Impossible to do something else.
Right.
So I'm not saying we don't need to discuss it, but at some point, we need to put them all on the same.
And the problem with, when you start talking about what's it knocking out, you're talking about other multi-billion-dollar projects, which is going to take a lot of time and research to develop. And geez, I mean, we've only got 2 years to spend the money, although I'm quite sure that they'll probably.
You'll get extended, yeah, and you 2 years to commit money.
Yeah.
Then it's another year to actually physically.
Yeah.
Rather than get them all on the table and evaluate them against each other and whatnot, establish a project like this as a priority and then rank those coming in afterwards and compare that. Has something come up that's almost more important than this, or it serves the public better, or?
Oh, you're not saying pull the trigger on the project, you're just.
I'm saying just the opposite. I'm saying, let's go to work on this project with the idea that if we can get all the square pegs in the square holes and the round pegs in the round holes, that we're going to do it. And that means everybody's satisfied that it meets the criteria. It is worth being a priority. And,
Right, because your next step is to go with the architect firm and you're gonna spend a few bucks to have something designed. So for me, that's the question is, if this ends up, are you willing to at least go to that to find out, is it a 1.5 million? Is it a 2 million? Is it a 3 million, 4, 5? In order to determine where it falls into. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But in getting there, you may have to spend a few dollars, and those dollars may or may not qualify, so you may want, take into consideration whatever you spend may have to come out of another pot of money. Unfortunately, you have, that would be community benefits, some capital reserves that come to that, but
Oh, you're
there are
saying-
areas.
Well, I never thought of that angle. So your point, I think, is until you decide that you're doing the project, the money you spent to get you to that decision may not qualify to use these funds.
Those are the dollars that could be at risk.
So I don't know, what's 10,000, 15,000?
Oh, if an architect, probably 100,000.
Well, no, we're not having design work done. What we're doing is getting enough work done to get a ballpark
I
figure.
can tell you that each respondent has said that their fee typically is gonna be based on the cost of the project.
Yeah,
So in development, yeah, there'll be a design fee, upfront fee, but that will all be, in order to get to the point where they hire an estimate to do an estimate of the project as planned, and then their fee structure come into play. So I agree with Scott, 5 to 10 for this phase.
oh, okay.
Yeah, closest to 10 on the high side, even if it's 15 or 20. I think we could still spend that to take a look at it. And that'll have to converse with Kitty on that. But if not, just so that you know in advance that may have to come from somewhere else.
And I think that's worth it. I mean, if we understand what this project is, and you gentlemen, you understand, right?
Oh,
We're gonna take that elevator right down to the ground.
Yeah.
And redesign the entrance to this, the sheriff's department, yep. And that's what the project is going to entail. We have a new elevator. Okay, so I think it's worth spending 10, 15 grand to see whether or not that is something.
5, 10. That's what you're using as.
Yeah.
Well, I think 5's a little low. 10, I'm still a little uncomfy with.
Oh,
So we meet in the middle, it could be 10 to 15. I'm just going, Dennis, so help.
Again, it depends on
Right,
the discussions that you have in development.
that's enough, yes. How many changes
well.
from it, yeah.
If you'd been with us when we went through the process of developing the cost and the RCC, holy cow, it just, a project we thought was $250,000 turned out to be, what, 600,000? You know what I mean? It's just, everything was just a lot more than we anticipated. So I mean, if we're talking 10, it'll be 15.
are there, okay, so we've talked about this one. Are there other projects that,
I think that's something that this is where we're gonna segue back to Kitty, if I could, is that I think now that you kind of discussed that one, and that seems to be a consensus to at least move forward with that one. What are some of your other ideas that you want to?
Right, so today's intent really was about brainstorming about what else could be on the list. And then, we'll start to present to you on a monthly basis what we're getting from the public, right?
well, one, it's been mentioned, I mentioned it, Scott's mentioned it, others have mentioned it to me, broadband. The problem is I can't wrap my head around how we can, realistically do something that could make a difference. I see that we could spend a lot of money and not achieve a lot. That's easy to do. But, that is something that's addressed in the legislation. To me, that's important, but I can't profess to know how we can have any impact. So,
In my opinion, I think it's there, right? It's very clearly there, but how do we fit into that, right?
exactly.
And I think it starts with what's the state going to do? If we kind of know where the state is going to land on this, and that there may be pockets out there that never do get filled, maybe we fill in pockets somehow. And I don't really know what that means, whether it's the last mile connection, whatever it might be. But I think in conversations we've had is really about staying in tune to exactly what the state is planning. And I don't think they're there yet. I think I heard today, they've been just pushed back everything for 90 days.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the one conversation I've had with somebody that is working for the governor's office, I guess, is that they're thinking the same way we are. So that tells me right there that it's probably a dysfunction junction.
I think part of that is in some of the early conversations that I've been involved in, they're very interested in the money that counties and municipalities receive. So they're doing a great sales effort at getting a hold of some of that. So I think it would behoove counties and municipalities to kind of relax for a little bit. Let's force them to do something on a broader scale because they're getting federal funds coming in faster than they know what to do with at this point. Never mind the fact that, they can't get along down there. So that, to me, that's the great thing Kitty and I have discussed. That's kind of one of the great things of the commissioners about getting it two separate, what they call it, tranches, two separate pots of gold, right? Is that you only got half of it. You're only talking about 5.3 now. You got 5.3 later. And for me, and I think overall, publicly, broadband is like number one by far. But we're not going to get there with just municipal. And I think it would be a waste of municipal and county money right now to go in and do that and not take advantage of the federal funds flowing through the state.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree, and that's the danger here, is that we,
No trigger ever gets pulled.
that's right, and that's why I keep coming back to what's our job and what's our, it's not to settle social issues or state issues or federal issues. It's to, run county government.
And I think something is gonna have to happen. And the large scale that it's gonna take is gonna have to be those state and federal funds coming down through that first investment. They're willing to do that, willing to take the lead instead of sitting back and waiting and having these little quasi groups kind of look and try to sell and come in after our monies.
So
if I could, I just finish one, but one of the things I am running into, and it did come out of those conversations as well, is they highly encourage this Maine broadband connectivity. That's from my seminars, and I think Commissioner Blombacker, you may have watched that one. They encourage kind of like districts. And they said one of the best ways to do it was, and I agree, one of the best ways to do it would be like school district. School boards are used to talking to those board of selectmen and working, all amongst. I mean, we all know it doesn't work out perfect, but that's kind of the best scenario. And I think that's where the commissioners could take an initial step by receiving possibly some requests from individual districts who have already done step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're ready for those last steps. They've already done this. So for instance, in talking with Stonington, Kathleen down there, they were down to like 10% of an area that they don't have broadband to what they desire. And, that's not much, but they've been slowly attacking this problem for several years. That might be an area where the commissioners could, immediately help and take these funds to use. The same thing down in Blue Hill. In the Blue Hill area, there are several towns now starting to organize, and I've spoken with a couple individuals that are really eager about getting this done.
But aren't we talking about establishing a broadband committee? I mean, we can't expect Kitty to coordinate that kind of an effort, right?
No, I would agree. I think that the broadband committee is not a horrible idea. I think it's actually a good idea. Just when does it get implemented? But some of these groups have already kind of done that. They form that in their own areas.
Yeah.
So say, I'm sure we're going to talk here soon about a grant process. You may decide that part of your grant process is to consider these folks. They're bringing in all the experts. They know what they need. They know where they're at. They know where they need to go. And they need $30,000 to have this expert come in and finish off what they want to do.
Somebody or somebody's needs to sit down with these groups, understand what their needs are, what their process has been, their progress has been. I mean, who is that?
They're already doing that. If they've done it right. From your perspective?
From our perspective, from this office, in order for us to dole out the cash that they need to, we need somebody to understand exactly what they've done, what they're doing, and again, it sounds to me like that's more than we want to coordinate it to do. I mean, she's going to manage perhaps some of these directly, but then there's others. I think broadband is a good example, just way more than we expected her to take on for a project.
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, this is.
I mean, we definitely can set up the coalition to set up the meetings, right? But then what happens with all that information? How do you sort of filter it?
Maybe, again, to make this as easy process as possible is that part of their presentation to receive funds from you is they bring who they're talking to. And
I'm thinking that we may want to go to another consultant and hire this consultant to do nothing but work on
Just
broadband for the county and be our representative, coordinate all the information, get this,
If you can, again, that's a good idea, just there's several out there. Who do you choose? How do you choose it?
I'm glad to know there's several out there, so.
Well, and does it filter out?
There's several approaches, and again, it's as to what involvement, where do you, how far do you want to get involved? And how far does the commission really want to get into the weeds?
Whether it's broadband or whatever it is.
Yeah.
My personal goal is to make sure that when I say our money, this $10.6 million
Right,
gets spent to benefit people in
Yes.
Hancock County.
yes,
Now, we can give $5 million right now to connect Maine, connectivity and whatnot, and they'll do
I would hope you
6% of Brewster County.
I would hope you wouldn't, but,
No, of course not, but, so,
well, that's what I'm saying, when we start small, to the small, so, and again, I'm talking about the 20, the 25, and part of that process.
25 what?
25,000, because they've hired the consultant that you're looking for. And because of their area, they're looking at their 5 or 6 town area
Who's that?
and this group. So say in Bluebell, I believe, I don't want to speak out of turn for them, but they've kind of reached that point. They're frustrated with the slowness of government above, so they've actually brought somebody in, they're actively talking. So let's just say if they came to the commission and wanted, and what I would recommend to the commission is to say, have the municipalities received some money? Because if you're looking for 30, if you bring 15 to the table, then we may consider matching the 15. But you're talking about smaller numbers and being able to, to me, it'd be no different
But
than,
who represents us at the table for that kind of arrangement?
well, how are you, okay, well, so let's attack it another way. Yeah, how are you gonna do it with the grant?
That's what I'm saying. That wasn't a rhetorical question.
No, neither was mine, yeah.
Because there are other entities around the county. Jennifer, what town was it that when the guy found out that the drops were already in place, they just had hooked him up? You had a story on that a couple weeks ago. Was that Sorrento or Hancock?
Somewhere out there.
Okay, so anyway, they have a broadband committee in that town.
Right.
And whatnot. So what I'd like to see is us understand what's out there in Hancock County right now for organizations, just as you're saying.
Right.
These group endeavors. Find out where these are, make sure we understand where they all are, and then start figuring out how we can help them serve that. Now, who's going to do that? And that's why I say if we could find somebody who, who's a consultant or somebody to act on our benefit, to
Yes.
coordinate all this information.
Well,
I see you ring.
Well, I mean, you know who has statewide president and who's been big in the whole digital, I'm thinking of Axion in Washington County, Axiom. They have a nationwide president at this point for making digital broadband. But they're out of this county, but I think they would at least be a resource
well,
to say, how do we start to pull this together?
to me, the onus is on the entity that is seeking the funds. Because one thing that I've learned is that we're not gonna create it here. We're not, and if we are, we're wasting money. We're gonna be going after folks that are ready to pull the trigger and can sell it to us and prove that it's a function of county government
So Paul,
to be involved.
okay, so Paul,
That's important criteria.
Yeah.
Because there's gonna be a lot of projects that come that really the county government doesn't fit within that model.
and Paul, so we put the word out, say, look, if there's an entity out there
We have put up.
has done, no, we're talking specific to broadband. If there's an entity out there who's done all the groundwork, who is ready to pull the trigger, they need our help and whatnot, contact us. Okay, so who are they going to contact? You? You want to
Yes.
take that on as a project? Broadband coordinator for,
Well, I don't want to be the broadband coordinator, no, and I fully understand and agree with what you're saying, so if you're talking, what you need, what you're looking for is kind of the same thing we've done with Kitty, is some additional help, but somebody who has some experience of broadband, that when you're presented with a proposal, they can do the sniff test and say whether or not, these guys, if I was you, I'd back away, but.
Considering this is the it appears to be the number one topic, number one most popular reason.
Well, I wouldn't say it's number one for me. It's just a thing that was mentioned to me, and I know a little bit.
It's coming up very, very often in conversations.
Yeah, I would say I would be shocked if it wasn't the number one. Yeah. Yeah.
And how many meetings are we going to say that? Broadband's,
Well, until, to me, not many more unless something's, Phil
So
comes to the table.
so why don't today we decide if we get Kitty and Scott to start putting out the feelers, finding an
Yeah.
individual who can coordinate our broadband grant program.
Okay, and let's then go from there.
Well, we haven't established a broadband grant.
Well, just
Well,
maybe somebody that can help us do that, if that's what you really want to do.
What I want to say, Paul, is that we today are going to make broadband one of the major components of our grant programs out there. In fact, I'd go to the point where I say, we're going to set aside $2 million each year for broadband. We don't have to spend it all, but in other words, please,
I'm agreeing, sorry.
Where we're gonna get 2 million.
we got 5.3 right now in the bank.
Right.
2 million of that we set aside right now. So as we talk about future grant programs, we keep in the back of our mind that we've already designated 2 million towards broadband, even though we don't have the grant program up and running and don't know where it's going to go. Doesn't mean we have to spend it all for broadband, but we don't tap into that because I really think broadband is the number one priority for getting this money into the community.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and obviously everybody's experience with the pandemic perfectly matches up with assistance because of the pandemic, both from a business standpoint, from the aspect of, people moving into the state because, quite frankly, they saw the numbers here and they liked them better than in California. I've got neighbors on either side of me, both came in from California in the last 6 weeks. So, I mean, the whole thing is that, you've got people moving in, they're working remotely, they need broadband, it's good economic sense for businesses. So it helps out on the business side, it's gonna help out on the education side.
Absolutely. Yes, it's your future for education, for
So it's a legacy thing to me. Like, I look at all this money.
healthcare.
I worry about like there's always so many good causes. I mean, right?
Right.
We could get money here and there and there, all these different places. That's to a certain degree is going to happen. But I just want to make sure we walk away from this with something that is
Makes a difference.
Yeah, and that's whether it's the accessibility here at the courthouse is a major project. It's in broadband is a major project, and I also want to make sure the EMA is being addressed. Is department that has helped us out during the whole pandemic, make sure that they're being taken care of, whether it's some kind of an op center or not, that comes out of it. So I want to make sure we have some tentpole things that we really make sure get done. And I think obviously broadband's one of them. I think pretty much those three things to me are the big things, and then we'll start addressing some of the immediate issues and grants.
So I agree with what John just said. I'm not sure I can say that number should be 2, 3, 5, or 1. That's my only problem.
Yeah,
because I don't.
Yeah, well, but you gotta set aside something like you said, you want to figure out, you want to create sort of a budget here. A budget is a game plan, it's not exact. So for me, the second set of money is easily broadband, and if it came to affordable or workforce housing, those are the two major ideas. That can't be addressed right now, they're not ready right now. But one of the big reasons is that, we haven't developed a full game plan, and number two, the municipalities haven't received their funds yet. So you can enhance that $2, $3, $4 million with municipalities. For me, broadband doesn't mean our money. We work cooperatively with municipalities.
And my only reason for saying 2 million is that we could come up with a lot of good ideas and eat up the 5.3 here very quickly. And broadband wouldn't be one of them because we just weren't ready to implement that. So if we set aside 2 million right now, whatnot, and say, okay, we got 3.3 this year that we can focus on, then that preserves broadband, because I think broadband is that important. We'll be a while deciding how to spend it. And like I say, Paul, we don't have to spend all two. I'm just saying, and if we figure out this for $1 million a year for 2 years and whatnot, we don't have $500,000 go to the projects, but at least we won't have eaten up all this year's money.
You're just doing back of the napkin budgeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, I guess
But I'd like to start today making some concrete steps towards projects, that's all. I mean, I don't want to be here 2 months from now talking about the same thing over and over and over. And so I'd like today for the gentlemen to consider having Scott and Kitty recruit an individual to act as a representative on broadband and start doing the research and analysis and meeting with groups if necessary and having that individual come to us and tell us what, as he progresses, or this person progresses towards.
in other words, here's where you could have an impact, here's where you'd be wasting your money.
Let's find out exactly who's out
Yeah,
there.
we're gonna go find some options and then
Yeah.
we'll bring it back to you and see what, get your input on what works best or what seems to work best. We'll have recommendations and then, then we'll just move it forward from there. Yeah.
And again, I think we should establish this back of the napkin budget.
Yep.
Not and set aside some, I threw out two, we don't have to, whatever you gentlemen think based upon what priority broadband takes, but let's set aside some cash out of this 5.3 that can't be touched until we know what we're gonna do with broadband, if anything. So,
You swayed me, I understand the concept.
so it's two,
I would say 2 million.
2 million is a good number for today.
Well, with a caveat that,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. In other words, as we talk about other projects, we go in the back of our mind, we got 5.3 this year to spend.
Now,
All right, so good. I think we've made some progress with regards to that.
well, the other one that keeps filtering out again, it's because, it's mentioned in legislation, is affordable housing. Now, there's another one. How do you have any impact, and is it the role of county government to, to throw money at something like that? And if it is, can it have an impact? Because that'd be a great place to, again, throw 10.6 wouldn't do much.
Do you know what the cost of that 50 unit down on the island, they just get approved for?
That the lab is building right now?
Not just the lab. You ran the story, Jennifer.
I don't remember who's doing it.
I don't remember now what group it is, but it's a nonprofit. It's a low-income 50-unit housing. They're just getting planning approval.
Yeah.
But that's the case. I mean, there's 50 units, so you can. So traditionally, you're gonna serve 150 people, maybe, families, whatever. In a county of 65,000 people, and you're gonna spend.
And where do you do it?
Several $1 million. So did we did something. I mean, getting 50 more units for low-income people is a noteworthy thing to do, but did we spread our money around so that it benefited?
Yeah, that's the point, I think.
And that's the thing that's the thing I have a problem with, is a project where there is a lot of money spent on a few people. I don't want to begrudge this thing, but Make-A-Wish was the problem that the sheriff's department finally got out of, because they spent a lot of money for one kid. And rather than spread all that cash around through, that's why we come up with Christmas as a kid. We serve 500 kids, Christmas as a kid, rather than one kid going to Disney World in Florida. So anyways, that's my philosophy on this grant money. Let's see how many Hancock County residents we can impact.
Well, like affordable housing or workforce housing, whatever, however it's worded. It's something that's, I've gotten a couple emails about, people have mentioned. But I feel just like you do, that it doesn't filter to the top for me, not because it's not a worthy cause, but because of practicality.
Right.
You know what the practical response is going to be? We're gonna buy a used motel. We're gonna put, 20 people in there, to serve the island businesses, and the land's gonna suck them all up, take people in.
Yeah, well,
And who did we serve on the island? What mom and pop store? What the benefit of that,
that's right. And is it the role of county government to be doing?
Yeah.
And I think that really is out there. I think that's a huge problem that, even beyond broadband, it's hard to figure out how to solve that. And that would really be, kind of the responsibility of that area to kind of come to you and present a plan, not us trying to fix or come up with a cure. It's, okay, so what do you need? And we'll listen. The funds are there now if we're ever going to address it, but.
And is it something that's better addressed, more efficiently addressed, with private enterprise?
Right.
And John, just a few minutes ago, brought up another project that we've been discussing, and Scott mentioned it earlier. It's a little more, I won't say risky, but it's not as reassuring. It meets the goal, but the Ellsworth Historical Society has come to the realization that they probably will never, ever get enough money to restore this jail. And of course, that they have a deed covenant in there, whatnot. If they don't, it comes back to the county. And we have to assume it. They've come to us now and said, is there a way that we can jointly do something with that building and still maintain a presence? And Scott came up, I guess it was your idea, come up with an idea that together we would remove the building, save enough of the bricks, move something more closer to the road, use the existing bricks and put a facade on a building that resembled the present jail. So as you look at it from State Street, it looks like the old jail. It's a facade. And the first 10, 15, 20 feet of it is space that would have some displays in it. The Historical Society would have access to. And then the remaining part of the building would be, majority of that would be an emergency operating center, which we don't have a good one here. Now, the EOC, Kitty, does meet the criteria, correct?
Absolutely.
But,
That's what I'm fishing for.
yeah, the EOC does, but are we stretching that to do this project to build an EOC? Because we don't know what percentage of that building the facade would cost.
Well, my initial read is it's a big stretch. But I would need to be, somebody with much more expertise than I have would have to say, it's not a big stretch for these reasons. And I think that's why we have Kitty.
And we have a practical experience behind this. What worked, what didn't work, right? Where were the holes, right? If COVID happens again, what didn't work? Was this efficient? The system you guys used? Where did we not meet the needs of the whole county?
I think they did a great job.
Right. Well, there are a lot of enhancements over there that, as you venture beyond, as Commissioner Clark was pointing out, what I propose is like a multi-floor area behind that for maintenance offices, EMA offices, and also for the command center or the emergency ops center. And in addition to the back of that would be a barn storage for EMA and maintenance vehicles. And so where does this enhances our availability for an opportunity for PPE storage on a mass level and distribution, should we have chosen to do that. We could barely store it here. No, we had trouble getting it, but aside from that, if we could get it in a mass quantity, we had no place to distribute it. Nothing. The county could not help. Same thing with vaccination and or testing opportunities. If we chose to do it, there's no way we can do it under the current structure. But with the barn, similar to the airport in Bangor, you could have a drive-in if the barn was set up so that it was drive-through. You could have vaccination storage and distribution. And I am quite sure that, Director Sankey could take that and run with it with his ability to write. That would really, but the issue with that is we're not really enhancing a building And we're barely renovating, because does that mean if we use the current footprint, part of it to do this, does that qualify? And I'll finish up with this, some good news or some somewhat good news is there's another county who has actually inquired about having debt service taken care of. And the report I got back was they received mixed responses. For me, glass is half full. You didn't get an absolute no. So
And
You're
that,
talking about leveraging, not risky, but
I would not do it. I would not recommend doing it. I am nowhere near as comfy as I am with the new entrance. Nowhere, and I think I've expressed that many times.
I think you start with, it says capital infrastructure is not allowed. So you
Exactly.
start there.
Right.
Then you gotta fight your way through.
Right.
because that's what we're doing.
Tear down, new building, yes. But it's on the same footprint, so it's that renovating, you know.
But let's back up though. I mean, there is a project. There is a project. Now, whether we qualify or not, is that a project that
Right.
you would consider supporting for the ARP funds? I mean, what level of priority would you give that?
Well, here's why I would say no. And I'll say why. Here's where I would say yes, but I'm gonna start out with a no first. The no is because that's an expensive project.
Yeah, that's
That's not putting up a metal building at the airport.
3 to 4 probably mil.
Yeah, if you're lucky. So is there a more efficient way to accomplish what you want to accomplish? I would say absolutely, there's a much more efficient way. That's why I say no to that. Okay, now, why I would say yes, same reason. Somebody could show, was shown to me that, yeah, that's much more efficient. There's no, I don't know how they would, but that's what it would take for me to say yes to that.
Well, as Commissioner Clark pointed out, the other stone in this, getting 2 stones, 2 birds with 1 shot, right? Is the other bird in this is that at some point, there's a really good chance that becomes addressing the condition or conditions that will occur will fall under the responsibility of the commission at a later date.
Yeah, okay. That's
So
very-
theoretically, take a look
very
at this
fair.
project, think the number, okay, how much would it be? So you look at it, how much would it be to get rid of the building and to do without rebuilding? So yes, Andy has pointed out a couple other different spots that would be, one of them is right up the street here. That would be, and Commissioner Clark actually has talked about that.
Or the airport.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is though, you need an EOC close to your service provider.
Right, yeah.
So you need it close to the RCC, the
Right.
sheriff's department,
Yeah.
and so the airport would be inefficient.
Right.
But having it right in the door would be, of course, the best case scenario.
Mhm.
Well, then maybe the answer is, I mean, it's not gonna sit very well, but maybe the answer is you slam that building and forget about, the emotional attachment that we all have, because it's not, financially feasible. I would have a hard time making an argument saying, because I do love the building, it looks nice, all those things, but.
Right.
is
But
it
it needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sean, what do you think?
Well, I think it's a tough one. You're right, because I don't know if it's gonna pass the smell test on it going in under the funds. So if we were gonna accomplish something on a scaled down version of it, it would probably end up having to come out of community benefits to get done at some point. And I don't see that happening for 4 or 5 years before we can start talking about it, because this is gonna be all consuming for the next 2 or 3 years, I
Right.
imagine.
Yeah.
For big projects, kind of ideas. So it wouldn't be something that we would address real soon. Who knows what other federal funds might come in to address what perceives the
True. Yeah.
shortfalls that happened during the pandemic. And so it might be something that we use community benefits funds to address something, especially like the storage idea, something a little less glamorous, you know, that would be practical with the funds, then we maybe use those kind of funds from community benefits to tap on.
So we saying, no, it probably doesn't. Is it
That's
worthy?
my gut feeling right now.
Is it worthy of future discussion about this?
Especially if we're talking about trying to keep this idea of broadband might cost us, anywhere between $1 and $4 million to get done. And then we're looking at a project for accessibility within the courthouse that might run from $3 million to $4 million.
Geez, that would be that much.
If you get that high, I think knowing Commissioner Clark especially as well as I think we go back to the drawing board and we find a way to make it like we
But
do
you know
with
what I mean, like, we don't
the RCC.
know where that is yet, but
Right.
it's gonna be a big price.
Yeah,
And
So,
I hate to jump around, but you mentioned the courthouse, that presentation we had about,
yeah,
how does that weigh into this?
the new construction?
Yeah.
Well, so.
I mean, would we not need to do, let's talk about the subject at hand now.
The new entrance?
Yeah, not the new entrance, but the old jail.
Right.
If we freed up some room here
Mhm.
because of that,
Mhm.
would we need to do that? Now jump to the entrance. We still need the entrance if that happens.
I say yes. I think if you step back and because of, so if the courts leave, I see theoretically that we move the DA's offices in here. And I guess at one time they were downstairs in the SO. I've heard conversation, SO might come up here, so however that's configured, you still have one lone access right here that is really not, the most accessible, and in an age where we use the word, inequity, right? That, or even injustice. I mean, to me, it's an injustice that a person that needs those services downstairs has to go through all this to get there. It really is a quagmire.
Okay.
See, and
Yeah.
yeah, so in other words, I think freeing up space for the court leaves and whatnot doesn't mitigate the need for that other entrance.
Exactly.
But
Okay,
it
so that was
does,
the
but it
question.
does mitigate the EOC, because now we could have an EOC up here in this building. So
Right.
that does mitigate that.
It could, yeah.
Yeah, it could mitigate that.
So
You'd be surprised how quickly you could use the space.
so because of that, that's why one is important and one's not.
Yep.
Well, and the second, this EOC building over here, and whatnot, isn't just something that we either need to decide we want to continue with or decide not to for our own purposes, but the jail, Historical Society
Correct.
is interested in, is there an opportunity for collaboration over there? And I don't want to string them along. If that's just out of the question, we need to tell them now. We're sorry that we brought it up. We're sorry we gave you some false hopes, but that's not going to fly.
Well, and I'm with you, and I'm with you on a few reasons. One is what you just stated, but the other is it a role of county government to help one historical society over another?
Because there's a
Given
motive.
that we,
There's a personal motive in here, though, is that's because we're going to inherit that building someday.
Right.
All I have to do is walk away from it, hand us back the deed and whatnot, and we own it. That means now, everything we've been expecting them to do now for the last 40 years that we're going to be required to do. And we're now going to, well, it is, but now we suffer the political ramifications of flattening that building solely on the road. Right now, if we have to flatten that building, the Historical Society is willing to step up and say, we told them that we couldn't fix it, that we have no other alternative. We're going to have to suffer that alone if we flatten that building on our own. But that's the only alternative we have, because we're never going to fix it up. So anyways, it's unfortunate we can't find some solution to do something that's more plausible than flattening it and making a parking lot. But if that's where we're headed, I think the Historical Society needs to know that.
yeah, how long has the county not used that? Is it 30 years now?
79, they moved out. They moved the jail down here at 79. So it's been 41 years, 43 years. 43 years that they haven't used it as a jail and or residence.
It's just been empty.
Well, historical sites have open, of course, you've been in it? No, I mean, they've maintained it enough, they're trying to keep it heated, which is expensive, but,
I forget when we kind of talked a little bit about the possibility of the courthouse, the courthouse. Is it, on that, I don't know the size of that property, is there any possibility that with something like that developed, like, are we gonna be allowed at all to utilize any of the acreage there or no?
According to the plan that I've seen, I don't believe so. And I think Ted Lester even kind of
Yeah,
alluded
I
to
think
that,
that's
that
what I'm
was.
saying,
Because they wanted some private parking, secured parking out back, and even though that wasn't like an exact description, yeah,
He
I
did-
don't,
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
yeah.
He did say that it would work.
Yeah, I don't think he was really exactly sure, because I don't know if he was aware that there was actually as detailed a drawing as it was, or maybe didn't remember, but yeah, when I think I brought that up on the screen or something while we were meeting, it's at the very end of the plans, but it shows like, the parking lot, and then out the very back, there's a secured parking lot for, I'm sure employees and judges.
where's that?
If they were to acquire the
Oh, probably next.
Foster property.
Well, or in any property, those are needs that they would have.
Other properties, I don't know, but that would be, again, to put an EOC offsite or even storage, depending on where it was, probably wouldn't be conducive to what our needs are.
Well, I'd really like to put this other issue to bed if it is, if it's just not something we want to continue discussing in the future and let Historical Society know that I think that's where we are, don't you, Scott?
I do, and I think a lot of it depends on the answer. I would say, and I don't want to string them along either, I completely agree with you, Commissioner Clark. But I would, unless the board objects, I'm going to continue to ask my connections to see if that type of project, if for anything, to see if we can use it to establish a clearinghouse. To continue to see, if they come back and they say, well, yeah, here's your options. I might reach out to you individually or whatnot and say, well, this is what I've got. What do you want to do with it? But at this point in time, I really don't see where, I think if it did clear, I think the price tag would be the next problem. And I think you would be, Commissioner Wambacher, as you pointed out, or was that, it would probably, you'd be looking at using a combination of funds.
But it's just like the SEC, I mean, if that's the case, we go back to plan B and
Right.
scale down version.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we did,
Yeah.
600,000 was out of the question, we come back with, it cost
380.
Yeah.
380, something like that. So we did a good job scaling back,
Yeah.
it's still coming up with good progress.
Right, and I think that the issue would not necessarily be the additions that we're looking for. It would be, recreating the facade
Yeah.
and, the removal of the building and the whatever's in there.
Okay, so as we're talking about projects, gentlemen, and I mentioned this before, but I'd like to see something that we could do right now, immediately, to get a little bit of this money out into the communities and whatnot. And I have been talking with Kitty about this nonprofit lost revenue grant program. And I sent a copy of my first draft to Kitty. She made some comments. I incorporated it back again into the policy, into the policy, the program. And what I would like to do is basically develop a program where certain types of nonprofits, and we've excluded some in here for different reasons, but certain types of nonprofits could apply for reimbursement for lost revenues between the revenues that lost between April 1st of last year and June 30th of this year, up to $10,000 that we set aside, like a fixed amount, and I've suggested 300,000 we set aside. And Kitty's suggestion, and I like this suggestion, is that as they come in, they clearly meet the criteria. And I've suggested a small committee so that we don't all have to meet on every one of these or whatnot, a small committee, that the committee agrees that we disperse a check And basically, I have, this is my draft of the program that I would like to set up. And my whole focus here is that if we have an organization out there, a nonprofit out there with 100 members and whatnot, and we give them $7,500 to cover their lost revenues for last year, that is 100 residents of Hancock County that are served by this program. And we didn't spend a lot of money, but we do have a pocket of people, residents and whatnot, who can appreciate these funds. They didn't see them all go to Connect Maine, and who knows where they went from there, or they didn't see them all spent on the courthouse. But they actually felt some personal value with these ARP funds. And for every organization that has 50 to 250 members that we give something to, we have basically a group of constituents that understand that we're looking out for the little people as well as some of these multi-million dollar projects and whatnot. So I would like to look at this and refine this process, approve it, and get it going soon so that we could start getting some of these funds out into the community. And I'm not talking about millions of dollars, I'm only talking, I'm talking here 300,000, whatnot, and so there's my pitch. Kitty, you didn't get a chance to respond after such a second draft and whatnot. Did you notice that? Basically, yeah.
The only thing, as you said, I think the quicker we start to get some funds out there, I think it's gonna generate goodwill, right? And if they just see $2 million, $3 million projects, the individual's not gonna really say, how's that benefiting me, right? We know broadband's gonna benefit, but they're not gonna immediately. So I think the wider we can disperse this in some of these smaller pockets. It'll be interesting to see, nonprofits, for example, I know some who last year was the best year ever because people were more generous, right, with their donations. But I think you've hit the stringent points. I think I said my only comment was you don't want to, if you have to score them all together, then we're waiting, right? So score them as they come in, maybe say, yep, they hit the criteria, let's get some funds out.
And John, you remember we did that. We didn't score them all at once, but this would be a case of where as they come in, if they meet the criteria,
Yep.
and we can all agree that this is an appropriate amount, we turn it in. And then at some point, and as we do that, in the policy, it says that we'll notify the commissioners of a grant recipient. And goodwill is the word I was trying to think of. That's really what I'm looking at. It's goodwill. It's a goodwill program, not spending. We're spending a very small amount of the available funds.
So there may be, there's also some organizations that did take a significant hit, but also had no expenses because, their mission was not, was hampered because of COVID-19. So those are ones that would filter through the committee.
And if you look at, the
Right?
right, if you look down at the end of the criteria for selection and whatnot, a couple of the things, and Kitty and we'll develop some kind of a standard that we can apply to all of these. But one of them is that, of course, when you talk about lost revenue, you have to talk about your net loss.
Yes.
So in other words, if you provided turkey dinners once a month and whatnot, and your gross revenue for turkey dinners was $1,000, you wanted $1,000 reimbursement, wait a minute, how much did the turkeys cost you? I mean, when you got all said and done, did you make 500 net? And so we would apply that standard. And it would be just like you said, if, they may have lost donations at the same time, they didn't provide services. That's, we want to make the process as clean and as easy, but if you get some mathematician that comes in and talks about the probability of what the increase would have been in donations based upon this geometrics and all this other crap, wait a minute, time out.
I think this is a way for you to get out a large quantity, right, in a clean process, like you just said, but there's still the website. If somebody feels they don't meet this eligibility, they can still go to the website and they'll be reviewed anyway, right? Based upon the general process. So it's not you're done and over with here, just by going to the website, their idea is going to go on the list to be reviewed.
So what about the yardstick of, is it county government's role to be, right, we can't spend money to improve your house, for instance. So how do we get, I mean, there's got to be some link back to county government, right?
Well,
They have to be providing a service that's benefiting.
no, nonprofits, ATV Club, for example, they don't provide any direct service to the county. They provide that to the recreationalists, ATV riders, to supporting the recreation. That's their goal, that's their mission. And, but they're nonprofit. And so they don't really do anything for us.
Well, I see that they,
Well, I mean, all right, if you can, but I don't think it has to be a criteria. I think the fact that the members, constituents of ours who are involved in a public service or recreational service or some service, that they enjoy doing, and helping the public to enjoy as far as recreation.
well, what you keep using the word public, that's criteria.
Yeah. I don't know what nonprofit, that may be, we may find nonprofits that somehow just don't fit, fit the mold here and whatnot.
They specifically do call out nonprofits. They are called out
In
as,
the legislation.
in this, yes, as eligible uses.
Yeah, that's what prompted the idea is that I saw that in the 155 pages, that was one of the permitted uses, is to reimburse nonprofits for their loss.
But also the standard theme of, correct me if I'm wrong here, Kitty, is the standard theme of these funds is that, if you're negatively impacted by COVID or, the pandemic.
Correct.
And one of the advantages that we enjoy now with these rules is that we are heavily, travel and tourism, recreationally. So that might expand your opportunities just a little bit where, you might say, if the ATV club can, prove that it was negatively impacted by COVID and it's a recreational opportunity, that may be a consideration. Whereas, if it's a bike club in New York City where, I guess alternative transportation, but the negative impact from COVID is a common theme to your operations, is a common theme when they take each subject. And how do you identify whether this qualifies?
Yeah, they talk about for nonprofits covering payroll, mortgages, rent, or other operating costs as a result of the public health emergency or measures taken to contain the spread. They talk about mitigating financial hardship, and they specifically refer to loans or grants to mitigate financial hardship such as decline in revenues or impacts of periods of business closure.
So we'll say the local Grange held a raffle every year. They've been doing this now for 20 years. Last year, they said we couldn't hold a raffle because we couldn't meet people to sell tickets and we lost this revenue. I mean, that would be an example of where, because of the COVID, they lost revenue and they couldn't have their raffle. So that would be, to me, that would be a clear example of.
Yeah, but then the test is that something that's better done through private philanthropy, or because basically what we're doing is taking money that would be expended somewhere else for some public purpose and giving it to that's just the test I'm trying to.
Right, but that's the allowance under, if they can prove it, so that would go back to when I see it in here, and that's also in the rules when it comes to proving, loss of revenue, so you have to take like a 3-year average, and then you have a growth factor involved in there as well, but I think with that stipulation, looking at what you were doing prior, not just come in and say, I lost $1,000. When last year you took 750, the year before 700, the year before 800. The only year hurt is 250. Your average is 750, and so you didn't get hurt that bad.
No, I support the idea, I really do, I'm just trying to figure out.
Because see, I look at it the other way around though, another way, and that is that the members are our constituents.
Right,
And that's the goodwill I'm trying to get out there to our constituents to, so that when they look at this $3 million interest in here, they say, oh yeah, you spent $3 million on yourself, but you couldn't give us 300,000 to recoup some of our COVID losses. And so, I mean, I think it mitigates any backlash we might get for spending money on the courts, for example.
I think they broad stroked the regulations. They didn't look at it, is this the role of county government, right?
Yeah,
They broad stroked this for every entity possibly getting this. So that just makes it more challenging for you to kind of figure out where that good fit is.
Yeah, so-
I mean, because they talk about households, helping households,
right.
and they actually talk about weatherization programs.
Yeah.
But it's their broad stroke.
So I mean, yeah, because to me, when I hear you talking about it, Paul, to me, it's like the basic philosophical difference about what you think government's gonna do. You say county government doesn't have a role in this, but I'll tell you right now, I'm more interested in giving more money to things that you're gonna consider social programs than, than that, because to me, that's what the money's there for. It's to help the individual citizens that have been negatively impacted by COVID. And even if there's absolutely no role county government normally has in assistance with homeless or assistance with vouchers for housing, yeah, you're right. You don't generally take a big role in that. I mean, you do actually tangentially through supporting some Department 17
Correct.
things, but to me, we got the money, and part of the reason is to do that too. But to me, it's kind of a philosophical difference about what you see the roles of government. They say I'm a Democrat on the group, and so
Well,
I have a tendency to be a little bit more like,
No, I'm just trying to avoid that discussion because
Can I throw this out?
I'm
Can I
trying
throw this
to,
out? Sorry.
I'm just trying to, key on where we agree.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
and because it is a finite amount of money.
yes.
Right, and I thought you were gonna mention it, John, Commissioner. One of the things to consider here is the fact that Maine County government and the county government, more specifically the Northeast, does not operate the same as across the rest of the United States. The rest of the United States, it is county's role for a lot of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's why these monies were funneled through that way. And that's why NACO was able to give these monies to counties directly versus through the state. And this is also the reason why the state is really interested in our money, because they're sitting back going, well, you guys don't do what the others do. Well, here's your chance. Here's your chance to make it show that we can do it responsibly and grab some goodwill while you're at it.
So gentlemen, what I'm asking you to do is to bless this program, give it back to Kitty. Kitty defines the program, the grant program outline, develops an application, and then brings that back to us at a future meeting for approval.
That application.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with the basic outline and ideas of doing the grant program like we've done there. Like I said, I think there's probably gonna be other grants that we're gonna do that aren't gonna necessarily define into lost income from COVID. It might be that we're gonna do a grant. I mean, it's what I'm saying is I think we end up needing to do grants that are gonna probably address some of the negative effects of COVID that doesn't have to do anything with whether the nonprofit lost money or not. It's because they do outreach and work with, like I said, work with people who lost housing, with homeless, deal with opiate rises that have happened because of the pandemic. And so that part of it, to me, is something that some money needs to go in that direction as well, not just for offsetting losses from nonprofits that we want to actively try to mitigate those effects. And yeah, there's going to be a little more of a social thing.
Yeah, for me, the
I
criteria.
I don't think you're a curmudgeon about it or anything. I'm not, so I don't mean to make it, I don't mean to pin you down that way to make it seem that I don't think you have any interest in it or anything, but I just want to make sure that like, we realize, you know, you look through all these options of how we're going to use the money, that I think we do want to touch as, you know, help as many people as we can reasonably, where we can actually make some of the difference without wasting the money either, right? Using it appropriately. And that might be supporting other agencies that have the expertise to reach out to communities that have been affected by the pandemic. I don't know exactly what that is today, but to me, that's like a one way that we're going to be able to reach some of these some of the communities that we don't want to sit here necessarily do all ourselves, but we want to find agencies that will be able to help.
Kitty, at any point, are you going to make any suggestions on other ways to spend this that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different things, you know, where my head just went down East Community Partners, right? Meet with that group and say, where's your unmet need or what was impacted by COVID? What has become really, maybe it's a weatherization program that we support, just exactly what you just said. But I also think this public input can trigger a lot of different ideas and things we're not thinking about. I think the commissioners sharing, right, to all their constituents and organizations and groups, you know, suggesting, turn that idea in. We'll review every one of them. It's just, I think ideas are going to just start generating. I really do.
So by general consensus, gentlemen, can we give this back to Kitty and ask her to refine the program and come up with a thing and bring that back to us? Are we okay with that?
Yeah, I am. I really don't object to this. I want these funds to make a difference.
If you get time,
They will.
you should look at the specifics, and if something really stands out, you know, there is a list of groups that are ineligible and whatnot. So if you look at that group, that might be something that you say, oh, wait a minute,
Right.
do we want to make this group, you know, and there are reasons why some of these are ineligible. And you know, one of the most controversial ineligibilities is the religious groups.
Well, that's exactly the one I'm looking at right now, because
But the problem is that every church that didn't have services for 15 months didn't have an offering. You know what I mean? So if they, and now it's this.
no, to me, that's clear, but like, I don't know about around here, but else, in other places in the country, there's some faith-based programs to deal with opioid.
And it talks about some of the faith-based things. For example, if a church had a summer camp where they taught religious services, they wouldn't be appropriate. But if the church had a cemetery, and they have a private separate board, they had a cemetery association that depended on monies that they lost, so that would be a difference, you know, if they accepted all denominations in the cemetery, something like that. So that's, and the other thing is that they stayed away from any nonprofit that provides direct public safety services to a community, because the communities at some point will be getting their money, and those people should be going directly to them and asking for support. So that was the reason behind the public safety entity not getting.
You know, and it sort of tangentially addresses this, but something we just glanced on was opioid addiction, and, you know, their thing, you know, because that's, COVID has certainly impacted that. There's some really good programs out there. I don't know what they are. You know, do they fit in here or do they fit in elsewhere? But to me, that's a subject that's worthy.
But as a separate grant program.
Yeah, possibly. Maybe it fits under this one. I don't know.
That they've been restricted. They're ineligible for this.
But I think that if we target certain things such as that, we reach out to them and say, turn your idea or proposal in, right? We'll review it. So they just funnel in through that public site.
Separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that some of these get separate assistance. get additional assistance because of the COVID. That's what I was trying to avoid was, I wanted to target the people who were not getting assistance from anybody else, whether it's the town, whether it's the state, whether it's human services or whatever, so.
Yeah, I support this idea. I haven't studied this because I haven't, I just got it.
I think this is a way, a mechanism to get us started, right?
Yeah.
Get the ball rolling, get some of these funds out there.
Okay, so I guess we have that, Kitty, we have general consensus, if you to take that and start refining that, rewording it, and come up with a, obviously, the more simplistic application process. We don't need 2-page, what do you do, this is come, as opposed to good justification and documentation for the loss that they've suffered.
Now, getting back to, not this, but the whole picture of brainstorming, where, again, I only have, 6 months of experience, and this is my first in-person meeting, so are there needs that, county government has that I'm not seeing, like airport, I guess that's a separate pot of money, but, the RCC or I'm just pulling things out of the air. There's probably some things that we're not thinking about because I don't know anything.
It's a great segue, and at the risk of spending, we could spend a lot of time on it, but to avoid me spending a lot of time on it, initially is, and it specifically states in the interim rules, is hazard premium pay for employees that essentially showed up for work, and we can retro that back to 2020. In my mind, I have a game plan, I have an idea, has many benefits to it. And I'll just simply state that in support of it is that I firmly believe that if we had those funds, these funds, or a mechanism to award them at that time, that I firmly believe we would have done that. It's just me saying, that. And so I think here's the opportunity for us to do that. And so I'm going to, unless you tell me, nope, not going to consider it whatsoever, you're going to waste your time, Scott, thanks, but no thanks. Once I hear that, I'm going to put some numbers together, put a presentation together for you in the future.
I'd like you to, because I've had employees come to me about it months ago, about, hazard pay.
Right.
They asked me like, what's my personal experience with it, how do you go? And it's like, well, yeah, I got hazard pay,
Yeah.
I got an extra $100 a week.
Yeah.
For quite a while. Which
Yep.
our pay is a lot. And,
It's sort of a thank you for those that, those that showed up, without getting into the whole social spectrum of, those that didn't go to work or whatever got, but keeping it positive. This is an opportunity that presents itself. So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up to you.
I think Scott also mentioned maybe having a meeting with department heads.
Yes, that was on my notes. Yeah. Well, that was something later on as we close out with you, was a couple of things that we'd like to ask that you allow us to do moving forward is, one is to set up a meeting with department heads, to kind of have a same little round table with them, to include them in this whole process.
And I think the more that we do, the better off we are, right?
Oh,
Generate
yeah.
Ideas.
Sorry.
No, but
The letter to the municipalities, allow her to draft something up that you will review. And it's simply communication. We know that they're going to get funds. We acknowledge we have received funds. We can now actually put some of these ideas that we've talked about, such as implementing the immediate grant program. Katie will be, address it. Again, I think that's great communication. It should and will develop respect for the commission, and certainly will assist you with anything further that you do.
Yeah, the hazard pay and all that, that's addressed throughout legislation in multiple places.
Right.
And that's one of those subjects that is going to be a tough one because, some folks are, compensated for being critical and some aren't, I'm not gonna, I don't wanna give examples because it'll look like I'm picking on folks.
Right. No, let's
But-
keep it global.
But, I'm a little apprehensive because of the precedent that it sets, but there's not really a proposal on the table for me to make that judgment from.
Right.
So
Well, the precedent is restricted. I said I didn't want to I wasn't going to, for me, the precedent would be restricted. This pay would be restricted to the emergency
at hand.
at hand, at which ended, began sometime in January 2020 and it ended June 30th, 2021. So that's the time frame that I would be looking at. So,
And that's what these funds are, in defense of that, that's what these funds are for.
it
Not this-
specifically, yes.
This emergency, not one down the road or one.
Right. Correct. And it even allows you to retro it, which is unusual. Most of your claims on these funds are from, henceforth when you receive them. So,
This is one check for a period of time, not going.
correct, yes.
And what are our constituents gonna say about that? 'Cause
Well,
they may be able, like, obviously Home Depot is able to do it, but I would say probably 90% of the businesses could.
Right. Ironically, as I said, from the commentary that I saw, and I will admit, I'm a little surprised. It was the overwhelming response. I think it went beyond county employees, but again, if you wanted to take a look at that at a later date, and as Commissioner Clark has, addressed or kept separate from his project here, that falls for an individual police department or an individual fire department, which again are county services elsewhere outside the Northeast. I think you could work in collaboration with, at the most, in collaboration with that municipality to address that. So in other words, they address their own people, and if you choose to become involved in that, that's a decision of the commission.
With regards to community response to pay has to pay our employees and whatnot, A, money we're paying that came from the federal government. B, it's the federal government's criteria. They said pay as you say. So I mean, it's not like we took taxpayer money and developed this program ourselves.
Right.
This is basically a pass through
Well,
the
it's
federal
still
government.
taxpayer.
Right, and that's a great segue to a point that I forgot to make, that I feel very, kind of passionate as the buzzer, but yes. We did not enjoy the success. Well, success is done. The successful navigation through COVID. We did not enjoy that. We did not receive that without each and every employee in their involvement. They really could have raised a ruckus in the jail. They really could have raised a ruckus in the RCC. They really could have raised a ruckus in maintenance. Our people, 99.9, well, I'll just say all of them. Our people were awesome through the whole thing. And I mean, whether it be our response to a situation, they were very cooperative. And again, I'll go back, I'm gonna reemphasize this point, then I'll shut up. I think if we had the money at that time, because I remember conversations about that back then, if we had the funds at that time, that I think we would have done it. So,
So I'd like to see Scott go ahead and make a presentation based upon that. But I think, Scott, if you're going to do statistics, that I think going back to January is too far. I think it should be up into the time we close the courthouse, March or April or something like that. It's just my personal opinion that,
okay,
because you're gonna give us a cost for something, and I'd like to see that start sometime closer to when there was a declaration made to this pandemic. March or April, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, and I don't have the benefit that you guys do, and that I don't know everything that happened. I mean, we pay people not to work,
right, and
so I don't have all of that.
right, and the approach to that can get a little convoluted, which was originally, I'm like, okay, I gotta find a way to explain that. And so my other idea that I came up with addresses that pretty simplistically. So in other words, if you were to pay somebody based on their hours, it is supposed to be their hours worked.
Yeah.
So if they worked remotely, They had to be physically exposed to the pandemic. So if they work
Otherwise,
remotely,
hazardous
those hours
then.
don't count. Those are not hazardous hours.
Gentlemen, we're getting into the discussion that we'd like to have with the presentation. So let's just.
Okay, sorry, I'm
leave it
just-
at,
They're on the list and it'll be under development, right?
Okay, Scott, you wanted to say something reference the budget before we get done today?
Yes, I'd like
I'm
just.
sorry, wait a minute. Are we done? Are we through?
Yeah,
I think my only question is logistically, a month from now, 2 weeks, when are we meeting again for more discussion,
We're
right?
meeting again on August 3rd,
August,
but we also meet 2 weeks after that.
so both of those,
So I really would like, I personally would like for you to come again, continue the discussions more,
Mhm.
especially based upon if we get the word out, public, their response,
right,
and how you're doing with this grant, and have you made any progress with regards to a broadband
Yep.
representative and so on. So I'd really like to see you sooner than later.
okay, perfect.
Gentlemen, can you agree to that? Yeah.
Yeah, it shouldn't have to be an hour and a half this time.
By the way, the funds for Kitty are coming out of this grant money, so it's not like, that's good. Speaking of which, no, just a second. Is it the same thing, if we went out and found a consultant who was qualified and willing to take on as broadband director, and we ended up not having a broadband grant program, is that the same situation as the architect? We have to pay for that guy out of our pocket?
We don't really get in that level of detail, but I think that you can justify it, I really do.
I think that is more
And I don't-
justifiable.
I don't think without any qualms that you're not gonna not spend some money on broadband, right?
So all we have to do is spend something, then we can justify this expense.
I think just even looking into that, would we chose not to, but I agree. I would be shocked if we, if we didn't do, that's gonna be the substantial.
Kitty, thank you for your time and attendance. We'll see you
Thanks,
soon.
Kitty.
Yes.
So what's the deal with the budget?
So the budget, I want to let you know that I'm going to effort to have at least a department, small department or two present at the next meeting. So we'll be kicking that off and rolling, and I just have not said anything about it up till now, and, with everything
Do we
going
get
on.
copies of that before the meeting?
You'll get copies of the presentations, yes, and yes, I'm still finalizing, getting that going. May not, you'll have binders, there may not be much in it at this point.
Yep. Gentlemen, there is an issue that's come up a couple times for the last few years, and it's this one. If you look at the form that we do our budget preparation on, you'll see a column for the department heads recommendation. And then you'll see, I'm not sure what they are, but at some point, the commissioners make a recommendation. But as the commissioners make theirs at some time later, after the department head has, there may have been information that we got that changed the department head's original submission, or by agreement, the department head says, yes, I agree with that, I can do that, yep, I'll do that. What happens is that when we go to the budget advisory committee, they look at it, it looks like there has been I won't say dispute, but
There's a disparity.
right, when there, in fact, there wasn't. And I'm wondering if we want to go to a process whereby the department head's initial submission can be revised before we give that to the BAC.
So you're talking about revising that column to after
Revising that
discussion.
column. So if Bob comes and Bob says, yep, you're right, or this contract, I mean, this grant, this service contract got reduced. I don't need 5,000, I only need 3. And so we put in 3 where he had 5, but it was his recommendation. So now he gets an opportunity to change his recommendation to 3.
I would much rather do that than add another column.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so function, because I've read this, about this a little bit, I'm not sure I fully understand. In my mind, what happens is the department heads come to us through the manager, through the administrator.
We meet and discuss, I
Yeah,
provide the
we
payroll
discussed,
numbers,
and
yeah,
my guess is that the department head and the administrator are in agreement.
for the most part, yeah,
Because it's coming to us. If there's a disagreement, then we'll hear about it.
right.
And then we hash that out, and then from us, there's a budget that goes to the BAC,
Correct,
a single budget,
yes.
not here's what staff is asking, here's what the commission.
Right, well, there's
So
no,
it's,
So,
it's one budget, but they show the department head's request in the initial request, but remember that initial request could be back in July, and by the time it got to the budget advisory, it's October. Things have changed,
yeah, but isn't it important, the reason I'm bringing this up is, isn't it kind of important to know that, because isn't it given that if it's going to the BAC, that we have agreed on it,
who has agreed?
staff and
Well,
the
that may
commission?
not be the case. Sheriff may say, I want 4 cruisers, and then we're only going to give you 3, so I'm taking 4 to the budget advisory committee. He has the ability to do that. If he wants to leave that line item at $160,000, or it reduces.
So it is possible
Sure.
that you have 2 budgets. That's what I wasn't
well,
Well, it's
sure.
not 2 budget, it's
Yeah.
2, it's a disagreement on what
right,
number the BAC is going to. And it gives the department head the ability to lobby the BAC to approve their number.
Okay,
Now, here's the other problem, though. It's not a problem. Here's the situation, and last year was a good example. The BAC, when they looked at the budget and they saw the department head and the commissioners agreed, there was very little, if any discussion.
Right.
So, but if they looked at it and they saw there was a disparity there, then that became a discussion, only to find out that the department had changed their mind sometime later, but their number, the original number didn't change. So if you change the original number, now the BAC said there was no disagreement between the department head and the commissioners about what their proposal is. So
that's a healthy thing.
yes,
yes,
So
but it's not something that's ever been done before. And despite my suggestions in the past, it hasn't been acted on. So I'm asking the board to consider doing that in this year's budget so that the BAC doesn't get the false impression that there's been a disagreement.
So you suggested that like in that column where it would be the requested, I don't exactly how to term now, but like the requested line that we would have it match up with what's, when it's an agreement.
If Bob puts in a number, $5,000 number.
This happened a couple of years ago with the additional, the 12th dispatcher, where I wanted in January. We didn't necessarily agree. My justification was get them trained early so they're ready to go in summertime. There was a discrepancy there, or a difference with the commission, or not the commission, but the advisory budget, and they asked me what the difference was. I said, well, we don't agree. And they agreed that, and I gave them a justification on they need to hire them sooner than later so that they're ready. So I hired them in April, and it was kind of conjoined in with where we thought the expansion was going to be, and I don't think we just agreed on what that meant. So when I said, well, no, if I get them ready to go now, move in, I got my 12th dispatcher ready to go, and they approved that.
But see, and that's a case of where there was a disagreement between the
Right.
department head and the board, and
Right.
disagreement should be reflected in the
Right.
budget. But there are a number of times, and Bob's a good example, where by the time it got to us, Bob said, there's been a correction in my original number.
right,
So we took the correction, they didn't change his original number, which had they changed it, it would have told the board is that Bob now agrees with our proposal.
but isn't that explanation worthy of discussion?
It's a waste of time.
I try to,
That's what I don't know.
well, because of the history of the relationship, there's it's not a complete, full trust. I try to put it in my comments to say that when I make a change like that, I'll highlight it and I'll say CC and department heads agree. But they still have a tendency to look and go, you really do agree with that? And we're talking like, might be $200 or $300, might be, $500, but again, between what the department head first put in there and talking with the commissioners, like Commissioner Clark said, he's like, yeah, you know what? Okay, I agree.
Yeah, I guess I'm ambivalent because I don't know any better.
Right.
We've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me keep talking through this process. So let's say, I'm calling it two budgets because it really is two budgets. There's a disagreement, gets hammered out. The BAC makes a
Different
recommendation.
versions, right.
In
right.
different
Right,
versions of
right,
the
because
same
BAC
budget.
could come out differently.
Yeah, so then what comes back to the commission
Mm-hmm,
is the BAC budget. So now we have three different versions. And we're at liberty to approve what we want.
Wow.
depending on how the vote BAC
It
was.
has to be, yeah, depends on the vote. Because it
If they have a
doesn't
simple
depend on the
majority
vote
of
of the
two-thirds or
BAC,
more, it
and
takes
then
unanimous
we
vote
would
of
be,
us. Yeah, two-thirds of the BAC or more, they have to be unanimous of us.
Yeah, but we're the ultimate decision makers. We're not bound in any shape or form to listen to what they say.
Actually,
By statute, you are.
Yeah,
You're bound to the point of where we have to unanimously
Right.
override their recommendation if they have a supermajority vote. So if they have more than two-thirds voting for something, it takes all three of us to override it by
Okay,
by
that's what I
statute.
missed.
Yeah, by statute. That's by statute. So,
which is, which has happened.
yes, yeah, we've had to do that. We try not to. I mean, a lot of times this isn't,
No, we gotta work, we all gotta work together.
but,
I'm just trying to get functionally,
and occasionally, I know there's been occasions where by the time the budget, by the time they approved theirs and sent back to us, something happened that made us have to change that, that they would have agreed to. It's just so we had to override it just because we found something the last minute.
and we're not involved in the BAC process.
We are here and acting as a resource to them.
Right.
Through our administrator or
Well, I mean.
we're
You
physically.
can be.
You can physically be here, and I try to be at every BAC meeting as the chair.
I prefer you to be here. I think it's great representation for the commission, and they like to, it's cordial dialogue now. Yeah, compared to what they were used to prior to our arrival, so for me, I think it functions great. That's why when you suggested about putting another column in, I really don't want to do that.
I don't want to change.
I agree with changing that first number. That seems to be very simplistic if that works.
And as we're meeting with the department head, we say, okay, Bob, are we agreed now this is a good number?
Right.
And Bob says, yes, we changed his number, his original submission to the new number. So it looks like, yeah, it reflects the agreement that we had in place.
Right.
Yeah, because to me, I think that we sort of have to agree, or we should agree.
Well,
Otherwise, we get-
as a private department head, though, I like the ability to be able to say, okay, commissioners, if you can't agree with that, I'm going to talk to the BAC and get them to agree with it again. So I lobby them. I mean, that's the process. So, Dennis,
If I'm not mistaken, there is an initial column and then there's the manager's recommendation.
No, there's
Is that on now?
yeah, I've never used it. No, there's the department head, which that's why you and I sit down, rather than doing two different columns, and I've always found it much more constructive to sit down and talk with the department head. And honestly, if they want to present something, I'll say, well, I don't think it's gonna fly, and but I'll put in what they want to put 5,000 in for fuel. And I go, your average is only 1,500, but you're gonna get roasted on that. Most of the time, they listen to me. On occasion, they don't. They won't, no, well, because of this, I want to take that forward. Okay, I'll highlight it. And matter of fact, when it comes to discussion with the commissioners, especially, if I'm asked, I'll say, well, if you're looking at why these sudden increase, well, if you look at so they've got to support that.
Yeah, I've been studying the budget a little bit, but there's nothing like experiencing it, so.
Yeah. It's a pretty smooth process now.
it's much smoother today than it was.
As a matter of fact, we could really do it in one night.
Well, and considering the actions they took last year,
Yeah.
the fact that it's going to be very similar board this year, that the fact that when there was no disagreement between the department head and the commissioners, it was a done deal, they just moved on. So you see, as many of those as we can incorporate it, the faster that process is, the less.
And how many meetings is that usually? Two or
It's
three?
been 5.
It's 4 or 5.
And we got it down to 3 last year.
Yeah, 3 was just because I give a
5 days
pizza.
long, so.
I buy a pizza the last night, so they like to stretch it out, but yeah, there's no reason we couldn't really do it 2.
they could do it too, if we made it easy for them, especially if they adopted the same policy again, and we
Plan for two.
didn't give them any reason to, you know, to wonder if there was a disagreement.
And then we start that process next meeting and we end that process.
End of October, or whenever in October, and then you finalize it sometime in November. Have a public hearing to finalize it
Finalize our submission to them.
to the BAC. Well, that's done, but that's done before, that's done like in September.
Because we have until December 14th to
Right.
approve the budget,
Right,
December 15th or something.
yeah, your final one,
Yeah.
after the BAC, yeah.
And somebody points out, okay, commission, you have to do this because they voted.
Yeah, I keep track of the votes, we keep track of the votes, and then so you know where you're sitting when you come to that decision.
So Kim, by agreement, gentlemen, we direct the administrator when that we're going to make that change to the department heads call. The reason I want Scott to be able to communicate that to the department head, that no matter what you give us in July, you have the ability to change that anytime during the process before the BAC comes back.
Right.
So,
There's no reason to keep track of, okay, well, the original submission was this.
I can
Now
put,
it's changed because.
knowing me, I'll put it, I'll maybe highlight it, or I'll put a note in there. I'll hide a comment in there that says that, you know, this was,
Scott, don't
This
give
was
them
this,
any,
but-
don't give them any reason to belabor the subject.
it's not gonna be in the comments.
It's gonna hit.
How long have I been doing this? How successful has this
I'm
been?
telling you that.
How successful has this been? I mean,
He's saying he'd hide it in a way that. you
It's gonna be
wouldn't see
hidden
it.
comment.
He had to-
Oh, no, oh.
No, it's not gonna be out there.
Oh, I thought you were gonna put it on your
no,
comments.
no, be a hidden comment, just for that reference, just to say that, you know.
Gentlemen, you heard the discussion. Do you agree with that process? Can you, Dennis?
Yeah, and again, if there is a discrepancy, it'll be brought forward.
And I don't think we
organically.
should, right, and we're not going to browbeat you people into agreeing. Yes, if you have a legitimate disagreement, you want the BAC to hear your side of it, that's a healthy discussion.
It just shows continuity in the development process.
Okay, gentlemen.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.
Thank you.